Hello, everyone. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Mahito, Part 2. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Mahito sighed as he looked at Haruta's remains in front of him. He was somewhat curious as to how the insane blondie's technique would work in a situation of sudden and inevitable death. In a way, it was impressive. Mahito had felt his soul be squeezed by something unknowingly just before Haruta's death. It was attempting to pull off some type of miracle and give Mahito the soul equivalent of a heart attack, to interrupt his curse technique. But it was too ineffective against someone who had full control over his soul. That small action, coupled with his battle against Yutaheim, Mai, and Kugadaki, seemed to have fully deleted his stocked-up miracles. But it really wasn't enough. Mahito could also repair any wounds to his soul with ease. He was a special grade curse at the end of the day. And his race was the main reason why the woman and two girls in front of him were watching him with a mix of fear and caution. It's you again. What do you want this time? Yuji ain't here. Kujisaki was the first one to speak out, confidently pointing her hammer at Mahito, much to the fear of the other two who stood behind her. Any jujitsu sorcerer with a pair of eyes could tell they were looking at a special grade. One that had just killed the human, they were struggling to deal with it instantly. Yet, Nobara spoke out like they were in no danger at all. God damn it, Gojo, what are you teaching these kids? Yutaheim could feel her heartbeat hasten. You do realize that Yuji isn't the only thing in my world, right? Mahito raised an eyebrow, his head tilting to the side as his dirty blonde hair shifted slightly. Kujisaki seemed to stop for a second to ponder that information before swinging her hammer in the air and pointing it back at him with a less than resolute look on her face. WL. I guess? I mean, you only ever appeared in public when he was around, right? Mahito rubbed his chin, his patchworked face looking at the confused girl in front of him incredulously. Fair enough, I am interested in all jujitsu sorcerers though. Mahito didn't feel like lying. It was true that he was only interested in jujitsu sorcerers and not regular people. That's somehow creepier. How'd you even manage to sound creepy all the time? Kujisaki was, much to the chagrin of those behind her, getting a tad too comfortable communicating with the odd curse. Mahito's smile seemed to bloom on his face upon hearing her. Well, I am formed from humanity's fear of itself, I guess I am creep incarnate. He felt nice, being able to carry a conversation with a regular human for once. Mei was different, as it was all business with her. Kujisaki? Not as much. He had needed to kill Haruta, as he was a nuisance who would end up disturbing his plans in the future. Nobara tapped her hammer lightly against her shoulder, eyeing the spot where Mahito had vanished. Freak's got a flair for drama, doesn't he? Mai kept her gun raised a moment longer. You shouldn't provoke things like him. I wasn't provoking, Nobara smirked. I was asserting dominance. Yutaheim gave her a side glance, lips pressed thin. That's not how I'd describe it. Would you prefer tactical bravado? Sounds cooler. You're lucky he found us amusing, Mai muttered. I'm lucky because I'm charming, Nobara replied, tossing her hair as she walked past Haruta's remains. She barely looked down. Besides, I wanted to see what the big deal was. He's approached us before, too, with friendly intentions. He's odd. You've seen him now, spoken to him a bit yourself. Yutaheim said. Was he what you expected? Nobara paused. Then shrugged. Sort of. He's got that gross uncle energy. Like he'd bring moldy candy to a funeral just to see who eats it. Mai choked on a laugh she didn't mean to let out. Yutaheim sighed. We should move. If he's walking around freely, the others might be in worse trouble. Nobara tightened her grip on her hammer and nodded. Then let's find Yuji. Far across the field, the sky shifted. Not with clouds, but with color. Petals spun upward like smoke, pink, red, and deep green, carried by invisible winds. Toto ducked a sweeping vine and kicked off a tree trunk, launching himself back into the fray. Yuji followed on his heels, fists glowing again with cursed energy. They struck together, Toto from above, Yuji from the side. But Hanami absorbed the impact, staggering only slightly before retaliating. She swung her arm, but not before hearing a clap. She ended up hitting the air as another one of Yuji's fists buried itself into her side. She was getting overwhelmed. From the side, Nanami also slashed at her wooden horns, her weak spot. She severed one of them, causing her a tremendous amount of pain. Aff! Her screams echoed in the minds of the sorcerers as a wall of roots erupted from the earth, pushing all of the sorcerers away. Nanami sliced cleanly through them with one swing of his blade, cursed energy splitting the woven bark like rice paper. "I don't think she's going down easy," Yuji grunted. "She's stalling," Toto said. "Why? Who knows? But I sure as hell don't want to find out, brother." Toto had already calculated most possibilities with his 500,000 IQ brain CPU. And he had some sort of premonition as to what was coming next. Unfortunately, he failed to predict how quickly it would happen. Then the wind stopped. The petals froze in the air, suspended. And the world shifted. All at once. The ground softened. The trees leaned in closer. The sky took on a pink hue, as if the sun were blooming rather than burning. Petals fell gently, but they didn't land. They hovered, each one humming with cursed energy. A dome rose in the space around them, invisible and yet undeniable. A pressure in the chest. A silence in the ears. Hanami took a single step forward. Domain expansion. Her voice echoed in their minds, as it had before, a whisper flowing as if it were a petal in the wind. Shining sea of growing branches. The trees bent inward. The petals spun faster. The very air thickened, heavy with life. And a light exploded forward from Hanami's feet. Yuji's eyes widened. A domain dash. Toto clapped once, shifting places with him just as a strangely shining vine stabbed through where he'd stood. The clapping sorcerer was prepared enough to block the golden vine, kicking it away as he rolled to the side. Nanami moved to cover them, but even he couldn't mask the tension in his voice. "This is bad." He looked around. The world surrounding them had shifted. The forest they were in previously was unrecognizable, all roots and trees were shining gold, and everything looked too beautiful to be real. It was almost beautiful enough to take away his will to fight. It would have managed to do so had Toto not moved immediately the moment after. Simple domain dash. Toto sweated heavily as he deployed the domain that his teacher Yuki Tsukumo had taught him. But even so, they were in a pretty bad situation. Thankfully for them, Hanami's domain wasn't one made to kill. Not immediately. It was overwhelming. To bury. To reclaim. They were trapped in a world where nature had complete control. And Hanami was its god. Elsewhere, Mahito paused. His footsteps halted mid-air, one toe still resting on a high branch overlooking the broader Kyoto compound. He tilted his head. The cursed energy in the air had shifted. Not subtly. Not slowly. Like a stone dropped in a perfectly still lake. Ah. He smiled. Hanami's domain? I guess the situation has strayed too far. Toto and Yuji may actually be in danger. For a moment, he stayed still. Then he closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of Hanami's domain expand across the landscape like an opening flower. His own cursed energy coiled instinctively, like a cat arching its back. It's a bit early for a third meeting, he whispered. Yet, when looking up, the anti-Gojo barrier was still standing strong. But I guess it's my cue. He turned, his back sprouting insect-like wings as he became weightless in the air, and began drifting toward the heartbeat of power. Faster than the wind. Lighter than mist. Drawn by curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, the hope that something interesting was about to happen. Mahito had always believed that the concept of perfection was something he needed to embody. Perfection in action, perfection in social interactions, perfection in style. Perfection in all that pertained to his image. Yet, beneath that perfect facade, something always festered. A sensation that never left. Unclean. No matter how much he scrubbed or how many times he cleaned. Every time he looked in the mirror, blood covered his face, his hands, his smile. Even when displaying a perfect smile, he felt dirty. From a young age, he had wanted to make it in the world. To become rich, by any means necessary, and to help those like him. He had clawed his way up, scraping for wealth, influence, for a sense of freedom. And he had gotten it. Built it from nothing. Brick by brick. And corpse by corpse. The smile he wore in life had been polished to a gleam. The suits tailored. Language refined. A man of the people, he had called himself. A man of elegance. But underneath it all? Dirty. Even at the end, all he smelled was blood. All he saw was blood. The way his body had fallen wasn't poetic. It wasn't cinematic. It was messy. Ugly. Imperfect. But it was perfect for him. Because it was honest. And in his second life? There was no stench that clung to him. He didn't mind the stench of the sewers, he didn't mind the stench of blood. It was nothing compared to what had clung to him in his past life. The stench of guilt and weakness of humanity had been burned away with his rebirth. No more lies. Only shape. Only soul. He was not clean. But even better, he was complete. And so, as he approached the dark green barrier of Hanami's domain, his steps were light, unhurried. Like a guest arriving fashionably late to a concert he had no ticket for. He placed one hand against the barrier. It rippled faintly, resisting for a moment. Then parted. It was not made to hold people outside after all. And so, Mahito stepped inside. And the world changed again. The soil beneath his feet was soft, spongy, almost breathing. Shining trees rose in a wide circle around a clearing choked in golden vines, their trunks twisted like rope pulled too tight. Shimmering petals fell like rain, each one laced with cursed energy sharp enough to shave skin from bone. The air buzzed with insect noise. Not real insects. Cursed imitations, ambient noise at best. The hum of their wings was just slightly off. Like a frequency not meant for human ears. Like the forest itself was growling. Mahito smiled, letting it all wash over him. It was beautiful. Raw. Unfiltered. This was Hanami's soul. Her truth. The oldest kind of curse. Nature betrayed by humanity. Wrath slow-cooked over centuries. He admired it. Even respected it. But it wasn't his. At the far end of the clearing, he saw them. Yuji Itadori stood first, his chest heaving, blood smeared along his temple. Dirt clung to his uniform, his body trembling from fatigue, not fear. Yet his eyes never lost focus. Beside him, Todo towered like a wall. Shirtless as usual, his muscular body tense beyond measure. He stood protectively between Hanami and the others, sweat trailing down his brow as his cursed energy flared around him. He was still maintaining his simple domain, preventing Hanami's sure-hit effect from affecting them all. Nanami crouched low behind a fallen branch, his blade gripped in one hand. Even now, he was calculating. Looking for angles. 4 patterns. Ever the professional. And towering above them all, Hanami had rooted herself to the ground. Her arms were no longer arms. They had become thorn branches, coiled in preparation, and one shoulder still showcased a strange, glowing red flower. It radiated a highly dangerous energy. Her mouth was no longer visible. Her face framed by twisted wood. She no longer needed to speak. But Mahito heard her anyway. You should not be here. This is my domain. My burden. My mission. He raised one hand, waving absently. I'm done with missions. Yuji, Todo, and Nanami looked toward him sharply from where they stood, still catching their breath from the prior onslaught. Nanami narrowed his eyes. What is he dash? Todo muttered, he's interfering. My 500.000 IQ brain CPU failed to predict this. Mahito ignored them. He kept his gaze on Hanami. You're still playing the role given to you, huh? Loyal little foot soldier. Carrying out the will of someone else. This is not your concern. Hanami's voice rang in the minds of everyone present, sounding outright indignant. But it is. It helped me realize something. Mahito said. He looked up at the petals drifting overhead, letting one touch his fingertip before it burned away against his cursed energy. I played along for a while. Acted cute. Played dumb. Let Kenjaku talk about plans, missions, and whatever long game he thinks he's playing. He turned back to Hanami and smiled, wide, clear, unburdened. But I'm not interested anymore. You've betrayed us. Hanami's indignation turned to anger, and Mahito couldn't help but laugh a bit when hearing her scream in his mind. I was never loyal in the first place. Hanami's body tensed, and the domain responded, thorns curling, branches twitching in anticipation. You are jeopardizing everything. Mahito stepped closer. I don't care. I will destroy you. Try it, flower face. The golden vines shot forward. Mahito moved in a single motion, bending his soul, shifting his shape. The cursed energy warped around him like water around a stone. Vines that touched him crumpled and fell in splinters, distorted from the inside out. Everything in that forest was alive, everything within it held a soul. So, his idol Transfiguration could combat it. Todo's jaw tightened. Yuji grunted and took a small step forward, only for Nanami to extend one arm and stop him. Let them fight, Nanami said, voice low. If we're lucky, they'll kill each other or stall each other until Gojo arrives. One thing was for sure, neither one of the special grade curses present was paying attention to the trio anymore. You think you can win? Hanami said. Funny how someone as weak-minded as you can speak in such a way, Mahito replied. He raised his arms outward, stretching slowly, almost theatrically. You and I, we were never equals. We were never allies. Remember this. His smile widened. His gaze shifting slightly towards Yuji. Maybe he can learn a bit from my enlightenment. The reason you die today. It's because you are content with just being a pawn on someone else's board. Hanami attacked again, this time a dozen shining roots spearing forward with the force of javelins. Mahito's cursed energy exploded outward in a rippling wave, his body shifting as he took the brunt of the assault, yet none of the roots that stuck into his body could damage him. He completely ignored them, even as they dug further into his body. He spread his fingers wide, as dozens upon dozens of arms sprouted from his back, each of them made distinct hand signs. Within his mouth, smaller hands reached and formed more hand signs, each inch of his body seemed to move with purpose. In the back, an eye appeared on Yuji's cheek. Sukuna's attention was seemingly finally caught. And with a voice that seemed to echo 10 times over. Domain expansion. The forest buckled. The trees bent inward like they were bowing. The air cracked. Cursed Genesis. And with that, his domain expanded, bone and sinew tearing through vines and soil alike, splitting Hanami's paradise with cruel white corridors and jagged ivory archways. Hanami's cursed energy rose to counter him, and for a moment the two domains clashed, green and gold against bone-white brilliance. But one was superior to the other. And it only took 1 second before Mahito's domain was completely set and overwhelmed Hanami's. And Mahito smiled into it, calm and whole. His prior actions, everything he had done, to scheme, to bend before breaking, had all been counterintuitive. It had stifled his growth. He was going to course correct. I'm done with pretending and following orders. Now I'll just do what I want. And what he wanted was to win. How? That was the only word that pulsed through Hanami's fading thoughts. How could Mahito's domain have overwhelmed hers so completely? She had years of refinement behind her domain. Her cursed technique was deeply interwoven with her being, her soul cultivated over time. She had walked with Kenjaku for what felt like an age. She had fought sorcerers, seen death, grown stronger, and endured. And yet, she was helpless now. A vine cracked beneath her foot. It no longer responded to her will. The trees had stopped whispering. The petals had frozen in midair. All the natural weight of her cursed domain had been stripped away, peeled like skin. Her paradise was gone. Swallowed. Swallowed by something raw and terrible. The grotesque architecture of Mahito's domain stretched far beyond what logic should allow. Corridors of exposed ribs, ossified marrow like cathedral columns. Veins pulsed along the ceiling, casting a sickly glow. Every surface, every inch of it, breathed with cursed energy not unlike a living organism. But it was not the technique that horrified Hanami. It was the presence. The oppressive, unrelenting pressure of Mahito's soul. It sat above her like a hand over a flame, snuffing her out with calm, cruel patience. And Mahito? He simply stood at the heart of it all. Silent. No arms raised. No technique deployed. No smug commentary. Just understanding. A perfect stillness, as if the domain itself had no need for movement. It was already complete. Mahito looked around. He watched Hanami's form begin to bend under the weight of his world, and yet, his thoughts weren't focused on the fight. Not truly. Instead, they lingered on a single, quiet revelation. He had always believed that a domain expansion was a refinement of technique. Only those who had mastered their cursed technique could manifest a domain of worth. That was what his recollection told him. What he remembered learning from watching the jujitsu world on a screen. But now? He knew that was only half the truth. A domain was not simply an extension of a technique. It was the soul, laid bare. Refined. Shaped. And while a cursed technique gave it form, it was not what gave it strength. What gave it power was something else entirely. Identity. Conviction. The self. That was why Gojo's domain was overwhelming. Not just because of the limitless. But because Gojo Satoru believed in himself as the honored one. Because he was so assured in his view of the world that even reality bent around it. That was why Sukuna's domain held such cruel artistry. Why he could perform such divine feats so casually. Because Sukuna saw himself as divine. His authority absolute. His soul unquestionable. And that was why Mahito's domain, Cursed Genesis, had now eclipsed anything that his original counterpart had imagined possible. Because he had stopped pretending. He had abandoned the masks, the games, the flattery. No more pretending around Kenjaku or trying to play small tricks. No more playing at being young or new or charming. He had stepped fully into what he was. And the domain answered. The shape of his world no longer mimicked what he had seen in others. It no longer bent to fear or admiration. It followed his soul. His understanding. And in the jujitsu world, the soul was everything. Yuji's breath hitched. It wasn't the visuals of the domain that shook him. It wasn't the eerie atmosphere or the grotesque surroundings. It was what he felt. His knees buckled for just a moment. His heartbeat slowed, as if his own body was no longer sure it needed to keep going. He felt bare. Stripped. As if someone had peeled his thoughts from his skull and pinned them to the wall. Todo grunted beside him, jaw clenched tight, beads of sweat trailing down his temple. "I don't like this," he muttered. Nanami said nothing. His grip on the hilt of his blade was white-knuckled. He could barely keep his stance. The domain wasn't hurting them. Not physically. But they all knew. They were within Mahito's world now. They existed within his grasp. Even Todo's simple domain, refined to precision, felt like a candle flickering in a storm. "It feels," Nanami finally said, "as if my soul has been bared before the world." Yuji nodded. "He's not even looking at us." That was the worst part. Mahito wasn't concerned about them. They were irrelevant here. They were not even there to witness the battle of two special-grade curses. They were looking at an execution. Hanami's form bent further, branches cracking, bark peeling. She tried to gather cursed energy, to call it from the roots, from the air, from the vestiges of her once beautiful paradise. But nothing answered. Her domain had not been shattered. It had been overwritten. Unmade. Mahito stepped forward once, still calm. His voice came low, thoughtful. "You never thought about it, did you? Why some people are stronger than others, even when their techniques are the same?" Hanami didn't answer. She couldn't move, her entire body stuck in place, her soul held forcefully within Mahito's domain. Gojo's 6 eyes. Limitless. They're powerful, yes. But what if someone else was born with them? Would they be the strongest, too? His footfall echoed in the chamber of bone. No. Because it's not the eyes that make him strong. It's him. You think my domain is stronger because I understand my technique better than you do? That's not it. It's because I understand myself better. The walls pulsed. The ceiling groaned. And in that moment, Hanami's limbs fell limp. Her roots cracked. Her soul flickered. Mahito raised one hand. Not to strike. Not to attack. Just to feel. His fingers danced slightly in the air, then curled. Hanami's body jerked once. Her soul was caught, it had been from the start. There was no escape. Within his domain, her soul was no longer hers to hold. You chose to die for a plan that wasn't yours. A promise for a world that shouldn't interest you. You were a prisoner of someone else's dream. Mahito's head tilted slightly. You should have gone with your gut, grown and crept your roots into humanity indiscriminately, consumed more and more, until you reached the heights of Gojo Satoru himself. A last dash. He exhaled once, as if letting something go. Then closed his hand. Hanami's form dissolved into nothing. No explosion. No screaming. No triumphant declaration of death. Just silence, as her soul unwound at Mahito's command and faded like morning fog. She had no final words. No plea or curse to put on the world. Only the quiet recognition that she had been wrong, and it was too late to change it. The moment lingered. Yuji, Todo, and Nanami stood still. Mahito didn't move either. He didn't even blink. He felt it. Something watching. Something awake. He turned, not toward the others, but toward the center of his domain. His smile didn't falter. The pressure rose. Not from the domain, but from within Yuji's very soul, where another one, more ancient, was still imprisoned. Mahito saw it now. He saw him. Not with his eyes, but with his soul. A figure sat on a throne of jagged human bones, with authority unseen but undeniable, pulsed at the very edge of Mahito's awareness. Mahito took a step forward without any fear or trepidation, a calm smile nestled on his face. Sukuna. Not in the flesh, but in the spirit. A mere vision of the King of Curses, only present because Yuji's soul was bared in his domain. Mahito was not the same as his original counterpart. He could resist the pull and completely ignore Sukuna's presence. He was, after all, merely a fragment of the King of Curses. 2 or 3 fingers at best. But Mahito saw the situation as an opportunity. Well, it's as good a time as any to speak with the king himself. The throne of bones loomed at the core of Yuji's soul, which was nothing less than a perfect prison. The throne was not built, not constructed, but grown. A monument to violence and order, made entirely from contorted remains. Spines curled like ivory arms to frame the base, while ribcages stretched outward to form steps. Skulls were fused together into a crest, each one facing outward with empty sockets. And upon that throne sat Sukuna, the King of Curses. He rested with one elbow balanced on his knee, a single finger curled against his jaw. His expression was unreadable. Not cruel, not bemused, not even annoyed. Just, watching. Like a king observing the arrival of a foreign dignitary. Mahito's steps were slow, steady. He didn't bow. He didn't smirk. He didn't speak. He simply walked forward until he stood at the base of the throne, just close enough for their cursed energy to brush. The pressure between them was thick with potential. Not hostility. Not submission. Just the kind of tension that arises when 2 predators recognize that they are not alone. You walk like this place belongs to you, Sukuna said finally. Mahito looked around. It does while you stand in my domain. Sukuna raised one brow. Interesting. You say that even as you face me? Mahito nodded once. Why would I not? Were you expecting me to be afraid? The King of Curses studied him with something bordering on interest. His eyes, like dying stars, searched Mahito's face for something real. He found it. You've changed quite a lot since I last saw you. I guess even a maggot like you can shine in the dark. Maggot? Tough words for someone stuck in a cage. Bit indeed, I've grown, Mahito replied, his voice low. Before Mahito could continue, Sukuna's face twisted with annoyance, and his fingers raised. In an instant, Mahito split his soul, bending it around an invisible slash that he had quite easily predicted. His soul then returned to shape, unfazed. That small action made Sukuna raise an eyebrow, his annoyance turning to interest once more. It seems you aren't just talk. But don't get smug, dodging a probing strike is hardly impressive. Of course, a choreographed slash is easy to avoid. But at this point, I am confident to face you. Mahito said. I thank that clarity that came from shedding lies. He folded his arms, his expression confident, resolute. Sukuna's mouth twitched into something close to a grin. You're not afraid. Even now. Mahito took one more step forward. I understand the truth of your state. You are bound within a body you do not control. You are just a fragment of a once great sorcerer. Or curse, rather. Sukuna made no move, but the bones around his throne pulsed, their resonance vibrating through the marrow of that strange inner world. You understand nothing. Mahito didn't blink. I understand that power means nothing without identity. You taught me that, actually. Not in words, but by what you are. Sukuna tilted his head. Explain. The hint of an amused smile rose on his lips once more. Mahito breathed in slowly. The air tasted of rust and ash. You were feared because of your strength. Worshipped because of your technique. But what made you king was your conviction. You did not ask the world to bend. You never doubted that it would. He gestured to the walls around them. Veins and bone pulsed in rhythmic unity. That's what a domain is. Not a technique. Not a battlefield. It's a reflection. A mirror that shows what the soul believes to be true. Your technique shapes the rules, Mahito continued, but your belief gives them weight. Sukuna did not interrupt. He simply listened. That in itself was strange. I watched, Mahito said. I learned. And as sorcerers or curses, vestiges of curse energy, our will, our very souls shape the world. A quiet pause. And what of you? Sukuna asked. Do you think your soul is enough? Mahito smiled faintly. Yes. Even now? Especially now. Sukuna's hand opened slowly, resting on the arm of his throne. I see it now. Your conviction. Was that small display worth your attention? Mahito asked. If you had been born in the Heian era, Sukuna said, you would have either ruled beside me or died trying. The latter most likely. But you would not have gone unnoticed. Mahito chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. Take it however you want. Weaklings do not speak like this. And cowards do not create thrones of their own. Mahito's hands remained at his sides, calm. I didn't bring you here to challenge you. Not today. No, Sukuna said. But you wanted something. Not a thing, Mahito said. Just a moment. A chance to look you in the eye. To understand you. And to be understood. Sukuna leaned forward slightly. And what do you understand? That you were never really a curse, Mahito said. Not in the way others are. You're a sorcerer who became something else. Not just because the world rejected you. But because you rejected it back. And you? I was born a curse, but I've never felt like one. Mahito's voice lowered. I don't care for Kenjaku's goals. I don't care for humanity's survival. I'm not here for a grand purpose. He exhaled. I'm here because I want to be. Sukuna nodded. That is the only reason worth anything. Silence stretched again. Not uncomfortable. Just absolute. Then Mahito spoke again. I won't stop you. When your time comes. You won't help either. No. But I'll watch. That, Sukuna said, standing now, his form towering over Mahito, is bound to be fun. A deranged smile spread across his lips. Mahito stepped back. The throne behind Sukuna began to crumble, the bones collapsing into themselves like a fading dream. The light of the domain dimmed slightly, the oppressive pressure beginning to ease. And Sukuna was gone from Mahito's vision. The domain pulsed once. And then cursed Genesis collapsed inward, folding like a cocoon returning to stillness. The bone hallways, the breathing walls, the cathedral of anatomy, all shrank and dissolved. Mahito stood alone in the clearing. The world was quiet again. The trees were real now. The air was breathable. Hanami was gone, her soul scattered. The only proof of what had transpired was the silence that followed. Yuji, Todo, and Nanami stood just a few meters away. Todo had his hands in his pockets, as if nothing had happened. Nanami's brow was furrowed, eyes fixed on Mahito. Yuji stood still, fists clenched, breathing carefully. Mahito turned to them at last. Mahito stood still as the last traces of his domain evaporated from the air. The lingering pressure vanished all at once, like breath held for too long finally released. The world returned to its muted greens and browns, the broken forest reborn into silence. The three sorcerers stared at him. Yuji took a cautious step forward, confusion etched across his face. What was that? Why did you kill your comrade? He asked, voice low. His fists were still clenched, but they weren't raised. He wasn't sure if he should prepare for another fight or lower his guard. Mahito's presence didn't feel hostile, at least not right now, but the way Hanami had died so suddenly, without struggle or spectacle, left a certain weight in the air. Todo exhaled and stretched his arms over his head, his usual bravado tempered into something more grounded. No reason to ask the obvious, brother. He said simply. He's betrayed them. That's what that was. He looked toward Mahito and gave him a small nod. Whether or not we could have survived without you is questionable. So a thank you is in order. Mahito didn't respond with words. He just smiled, genuine, unforced. Nanami's gaze was sharp. He remained still, standing slightly behind the other two, sword still drawn. Betraying your one is one thing. But you didn't harm us either, he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was a fact he was trying to wrap his head around. You easily could have. Even Todoa's simple domain wasn't holding firm by the end. Mahito glanced at him, the smile thinning. I didn't see the need. Yuji tilted his head. So, are you on our side now? Or is this temporary? I'm on my side, Mahito replied evenly. But our goals aligned. Yuji's brows furrowed, and he opened his mouth to say something else, but Todo raised a hand again, this time with less authority and more ease. Yuji, he said. He's not an enemy right now. And whatever just happened, an unidentified special grade curse is gone. That's a fact. Yuji looked down, the tension in his shoulders slumping slightly. I know, he muttered. I don't get it. 1 second, we were fighting for our lives. The next, she just died. No scream. No nothing. She was just gone. Something akin to an instant kill effect. Similar to Gojo, huh? Nanami said, eyes still on Mahito. Difference is, there was no trace of the curse left. Todoa's head turned. His curious nature as a sorcerer was put on full display. What did you do to her? Mahito shrugged once. I showed her the truth. No one quite knew what to make of that. Yuji frowned, confused and not entirely satisfied. Nanami said nothing, though his fingers slowly released the grip on his blade. Todo walked forward and held out a hand. I don't need the details then, your word to that curse. Thank you for trying to teach us, he said, not bowing, but nodding solemnly at the humanoid curse, before extending a hand. You could tell, huh? You didn't make much of an effort to hide your intentions. Nanami sighed, adjusting his slightly cracked glasses as he looked back at Yuji. Mahito looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then reached out and clasped Todoa's hand, only once, firm and polite. Todo didn't hold it long, just enough to show sincerity before letting go and stepping back. Yuji's voice was softer now. Even if you're not on our side. I guess I still owe you too. Mahito waved it off. You owe me nothing. What I did wasn't charity. Nanami stepped forward now, closing the distance with slow, deliberate steps. His eyes remained steady on Mahito, his gaze unreadable. I don't trust you, he said plainly. And I won't pretend this changes that. Mahito didn't look offended. That's good, wouldn't want it any other way. Nanami's brow twitched. If I find out you played us dash. You won't, Mahito interrupted, his tone light but final. I've moved past the point of needing masks. I'm not hiding anymore. Nanami didn't respond. He simply turned, walking past Yuji and Toto, scanning the horizon. "We should move. Not a good place to linger." Toto followed, adjusting the hem of his tattered pants. "I say we get ramen after this," he said. Yuji glanced at Mahito again. He looked like he wanted to say more, but thought better of it. He gave a slight nod, then jogged after the others. Mahito watched them go in silence. No part of him reached out to follow. No instinct told him to interfere. He had gotten what he came for. Hanami was gone. The ties to Kenjaku were severed. And for the first time in this cursed life, he had been acknowledged, not by humans, but by someone who truly understood what it meant to be king. Mahito turned toward the forest, the air still damp with the scent of his domain. He breathed in deep. The fact that it lingered in such a way in the real world made him even more confident. After all, it showed that he still had a Venus to grow, and many at that. There was still work to do, plenty of it at that. The threat of Kenjaku was anything but gone. But Mahito was done playing around and pretending. To grow stronger, he was going to stay true to himself. Time to actually start freely amassing an army. It has got to be at least big and strong enough to make the elders of the Jujutsu world tremble in their boots. And just as he was about to walk off, the anti-Gojo barrier that had been set up by Kenjaku burst like a bubble. Huh. The honored one is fashionably late, it seems. The sun hung low, casting golden light across the horizon, its dying rays painting long shadows across the treetops below. From high above, Gojo Satoru observed the world in silence. He floated effortlessly in the open air, arms folded across his chest, blindfold unmoved, cursed energy layered tightly around his body like a second skin. There was no sound but the whisper of wind through the branches, no movement but the slow retreat of the sun behind the skyline. He had sensed it earlier. A domain. Brief and powerful, then gone in an instant. It had flared somewhere below him, its pressure unmistakable. And yet, it had vanished just as quickly. No explosion. No aftermath. No death. At least not the death of anyone he cared about. He could feel them now. Yuji. Nanami. Toto. All of them were alive. Not just barely breathing, but upright, walking, steady. They had some injuries, sure, but it was far from what one would expect when facing a special grade curse. Gojo was thankful that no one was hurt badly, but it was still quite strange. Encountering a special grade curse was the same as facing a disaster for a regular sorcerer. It was always bound to be difficult unless another equally powerful special grade intervened. But now, there was only stillness. A quiet conclusion to what should have been chaos. Gojo exhaled softly and tilted his head, the wind tugging faintly at the fabric of his uniform. Perhaps he had underestimated the mad curse that had asked to be trapped within his domain. Gojo could feel that it was Mahito who had saved Yuji, Toto, and Nanami. He could feel the moment that the humanoid special grade curse had expanded his domain. He had also felt Hanami's domain. He was seconds from breaking the barrier when Mahito arrived and intervened. The honored one wasn't about to let such a good deed go unrewarded either. With a clap, he instantly appeared in the middle of the forest, his pearly blue eyes staring straight at Mahito's purple ones. Ho Satoru. You're paying Lil Olmi a visit? Gojo blinked a few times underneath his blindfold. He could instantly tell. The Mahito that stood before him was different. Grown. Heh. I guess it's time I take you more seriously. Far beneath the surface, where the light of day could not reach, Kenjaku sat within the heart of a hidden shrine. The air was thick with humidity, the walls heavy with the scent of damp earth and old rituals. Roots twisted through the stone like veins, and paper talismans hung from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic motion. The silence was broken only by the subtle hum of cursed energy that pulsed like a quiet heartbeat through the room. Jogo paced near the edge, his footsteps sending small echoes through the chamber. Smoke drifted in thin streams from the peak of his molten head, his agitation barely contained. Across from him, Dagon sat still, curled inward, his large red body slumped with something like exhaustion or grief. His tentacles moved only faintly, brushing against the ground in slow, uncertain patterns. Kenjaku remained seated, one hand turning a weathered talisman slowly between his fingers. He betrayed us. How else could Hanami have died before the barrier was ever breached? Jogo muttered, his voice low, teeth grinding against each word. Kenjaku did not look up. It is a possibility, we had no eyes inside the barrier, all the people that had entered it are dead. Or they're missing, he said. Mahito is the only one that is not dead. I could feel Hanami withering, Mahito's cursed energy only spiked, never died out. I waited at the meeting spot for a while, but no one came there. Kenjaku turned the talisman once more. The symbols etched into its surface shimmered faintly, reacting to his touch. It is possible that he was also feeding information to the sorcerers. There were more sorcerers than expected present. Jogo turned sharply. You weren't monitoring his actions. I was, but not closely enough, it seems. Kenjaku replied, finally lifting his gaze. To think a newborn curse can act in such a shrewd way. This generation really is as interesting as the Hainan era. Kenjaku was not displeased, he only found the situation more and more interesting. Jogo, however. Well, he was seemingly going mad. He trembled, clenching his fists, as the air around him warmed perceptibly. Heat waves shimmered around his shoulders, but he did not speak further. Kenjaku's tone remained steady, but there was a current of warning beneath it. I saw him come out of the womb with my own eyes. That means he learned quickly. Too quickly. And now he was beyond our influence from the start. Dagon let out a low gurgle, his gaze distant. He acted all innocent and peaceful. Jogo said bitterly, eyes narrowing. To think he fooled all of us. Just goes to show how you can't ever truly trust someone. Be it a curse or a human. Kenjaku stood, letting the talisman fall back into its place among the others. His footsteps echoed faintly as he moved across the shrine, pausing before a sealed archway at the far end. The stone surface was etched with complex seals and layered symbols. Runic kanji pulsed softly beneath layers of cursed wax and black ink. Jogo scowled. Then we stop him. Hunt him down. Burn him from the inside out. The temperature in that dim underground chamber spiked, Dagon wriggling uncomfortably. Kenjaku placed one hand on the seal. Power flared beneath his fingers. No, we can't seek him out carelessly either. Jogo stepped forward. Why? He betrayed us. Just give me the go-ahead, and I will turn him to ashes. Because there is still more to learn. At this point, he may have the technique I had been looking for. The silence that followed was heavy. Kenjaku's voice did not rise, but it cut through the air like a knife. If he does have the ability to alter someone else's soul, as well as a fully realized domain expansion, you would die, Jogo. If you went after him now without a plan, he could be able to kill you. We can't gamble you as well, not when Gojo hasn't been sealed yet. The cursed spirit's fists tightened. I also have my domain expansion, even more refined than his. Hanami also had a domain expansion, just as refined as yours. She was overwhelmed after you felt her use it, right? Jogo fell completely silent when hearing that. It was true, he felt Hanami's cursed energy spike first, then Mahito's. The volcanic cursed spirit trembled in anger, before huffing and turning around, leaving the area with rage on his mind. Ha! So unreliable. Kenjaku shook his head, but he still smiled in a relaxed manner. After all, he had plenty of allies. He turned back to the archway and pressed his palm firmly against it. The seals reacted at once. Lines of energy snaked across the surface, racing through the engraved symbols. One by one, the locks gave way. A low groan echoed through the chamber as ancient mechanisms shifted. Behind the stone wall, something stirred. Large black jars, sealed in layers of cloth and script, trembled faintly. Cracks spiderwebbed across their surfaces. The symbols that bound them began to fray. Kenjaku's eyes gleamed in the dim light. We have lost a piece. But we still hold many more. The three of the jars began to shake. Dust fell from the ceiling. Dagon flinched but did not move. The lids of the vessels began to rise, slow and heavy. Darkness spilt out like smoke, thick and pungent. And within that darkness, something moved. Kenjaku stepped back, his expression calm. Maybe not all of them are useful. But these three. Hee. The sound of her heels echoed faintly off the stone walls as Mei descended deeper into the underground facility. The hallway was cool and dim, lined with enchantments and reinforced charms embedded into the architecture. It didn't look like a prison, not in the conventional sense. It was cleaner, quieter, and far more secure. Only someone like Gojo Satoru could have arranged something like this without needing to consult the elders first. At the bottom of the stairs stood a door shaped from cursed steel, held shut by two talismans that shimmered softly with layers of barrier spells. Mei pressed her palm to the lock and allowed a faint pulse of her cursed energy to seep into it. The seals unlatched with a low hiss. Inside, the space widened into a circular room carved from dark rock. Candles flickered from mounted sconces, casting long shadows across the floor. At its center stood a figure she had only recently begun to understand more. Mahito. He wasn't restrained. There were no chains, no cursed ropes or bindings. But the air in the room itself was thick with silent pressure. It was just the cursed energy naturally revolving out of the special grade curse inhabiting the space. Even so, it was controlled. Precise. The room was not a place designed to punish but to contain. He turned as she entered, his purple eyes catching the candlelight in a way that made them glow faintly. His face was the same as always, boyish, almost carefree, but there was a subtle difference now. A certain open confidence that she had seen him restrain prior. Mei, he said, voice laced with curiosity. Didn't think you were the type to check on prisoners. I'm not, she replied, closing the door behind her. But you're not just any prisoner. You're also a business partner. Mahito's grin widened slightly. I like the sound of that. She stepped into the room without hesitation, her large axe resting lightly against her shoulder. Gojo is still negotiating with the elders. Until then, you're a temporary guest. Mahito tilted his head, mock innocent. Guest. That's a nice way of putting it. Mei did not smile. Make no mistake. If you lose value or betray your word, this facility becomes your tomb. I believe you, he replied without flinching. His smile made it clear that he didn't feel any fear. But I meant what I said to Gojo. Hanami was a fanatic. She would have destroyed Yuji and the rest. And unlike some of my former colleagues, I can think for myself. Her gaze remained steady. That's why I'm here. To test me? Mahito asked, arms spreading lazily. Go ahead, we may as well dance too. I've been training every day since I got here. Mei adjusted her grip on the axe. Good. I want to see it. Just how safe is my investment? With a flick of her wrist, her cursed energy flared, the axe already rippling outward, aiming to slice Mahito in two. Oh, so I'm a treasured investment now? The humanoid special grade curse didn't move. But his soul answered in kind, immediately separating, bending right around Mimi's axe blade. She squinted, undeterred, as she swiped, changing the trajectory of her blade. Mahito's body reformed immediately. He raised his arm with a smile, his forearm reinforced with tightened muscles, bone, and cursed energy. The blade was immediately deflected by his reinforced forearm, flesh shifting slightly to absorb the blow. He twisted, responding with a strike of his own, his hand extending like a whip, which she parried cleanly. Or she thought she did. The whip immediately wrapped around her axe's handle and torso, swiping once more and throwing her away, into a nearby wall. She couldn't help but sweat a bit. She could tell he didn't apply as much force as he could have. He had always felt dangerous to her, but now that she was witnessing him in battle, she felt even more so. Among modern sorcerers, I wonder how many can even stand up to him at this point. She immediately dashed back in, wanting to find out more. Mahito smiled, his eyes only on her as a crow under her control rushed in from outside the cell and barrier. Its body exploded with cursed energy, its beak pointed squarely at his back, while Mimi's axe headed straight for his face. Interesting way of fighting. I guess when it comes to martial arts, she does surpass the version of me from my past life. But she was not fighting a human right now. She was not fighting Marcus. She was facing Mahito. In an instant, his body bent like paper, head bending outwards to the side, while his torso bent at an odd angle to avoid the rushing crow. Mimi scowled when seeing him dodge, but his next action was even harder to anticipate. His legs immediately shot forward at an odd angle, almost turning into snakes as they coiled around her body and joints, rendering her immovable. In that very moment, she felt vulnerable, especially as she was in the way of her own technique. She had already used her binding vow, the crow could not be stopped. Or so she thought. And just before the beak could pierce her torso and injure her gravely, Mahito's arm, untransformed, reached out for it and grasped. It was a smooth motion. Mahito had managed to telegraph the bird's movements easily enough despite its speed. And the body of the crow burst like a soap bubble. Pretty dangerous ability. I was expecting you to be able to stop it, my bad. The exchange lasted only moments before they separated again, breath steady. So that's your curse technique. Manipulation of the soul? You really were taking it easy with me, huh? Mei said. Wouldn't want to ruin that pretty face, he replied. Consider it my way of investing in the future. She gave him a cold look. Who'd expect a curse to also be a sweet talker? If I didn't know you're on our side already, I would have thought you were trying to gain something. That made him laugh. And what if I still am? His snake-like legs uncoiled from around her joints, allowing her to breathe freely as she finally slung her axe back over her shoulder. Not that I would, as my tastes are a bit on the younger side, but do you even have the means, curse? We were pretty close just now. I didn't feel much. She had no issue teasing him back as she shot down his playfulness. But that didn't discourage Mahito, as he knew exactly what her tastes were. Oh, trust me, everything about my body is adjustable, he said with a knowing smile, his posture changing ever so slightly. Not in a grotesque or overtly lewd way, but enough to suggest he had studied her more than she liked. Mimi raised an eyebrow, being completely taken aback. She had no clue why the curse in front of her decided to take a younger form. She usually kept such preferences private, after all. But the confidence he displayed, as well as the knowing look in his eyes, made her uncomfortable. But she had always been business-oriented. She quickly composed herself, coughing a bit before signaling that playtime was over. Anyway, why did you kill Hanami? Her information is worth even less now, she asked finally. His smile faded, just a little. Because she was going to kill them. Yuji. Todo. That Nanami guy. Also, you already sold the information about her. If the elders refuse to give the last parts of the payment because Hanami is no longer a threat, it would look bad on them. The elders are sneaky old bastards. But you're right, they care more about face than anything else. Also, don't pretend that you cared about them. I cared enough to know they didn't deserve to die like that. I just did what I wanted in the moment, no need to put that much thought into it. Mei let that answer settle. Her gaze narrowed slightly as her white bangs settled over her face. He is starting to sound more and more like Gojo. You think the elders will approve of my deal with Gojo? Mahito asked, sitting on the floor across from her, legs crossed. Let me fight as a weapon for humanity? They'll need convincing. But Gojo knows how to get exactly what he wants. Mahito looked at her thoughtfully. And you? Do you think I'm worth keeping alive? That depends, Mei said. If your loyalty is as flexible as your flesh, then no. But if you're as smart as you seem, then maybe. He leaned back on his hands. Well, I'm smart enough to know when someone is judging my worth. And I don't mind being judged so openly, not if it's you. Her expression barely changed, but for a flicker of amusement in her eyes. Careful. I don't mix business with play. Then I'll just have to be very useful, Mahito said, flashing a grin. Silence stretched for a moment, but it was not uncomfortable. The candlelight danced between them, throwing long shadows against the walls. Somewhere in the far-off corners of the facility, the air vent hummed low and steady. You'll likely be tested soon, Mei said at last. By the elders. If you fail, there won't be a second chance. I don't plan on failing. Good, she said, standing. I'll be back when I have news. She turned toward the door, but paused just before opening it. Mahito. If anything about my tastes ever gets out of this room, I will kill you myself. He raised his hands in mock surrender. Noted. She left without another word, but as the door closed behind her, Mahito chuckled softly to himself. Interesting woman, he murmured. The flame from one of the candles near him flickered, casting his face half in shadow. And he returned to his training, alone once more. Yuki Tsukumo kicked the side stand of her motorcycle into place, the engine purring low beneath her as the evening light cast long golden streaks across the training grounds. The air was still, heavy with late summer heat. She stretched out her arms and cracked her neck, the leather of her biker jacket creaking with the movement. Today, she wore it over a black fishnet top, zipped halfway open to reveal the high collar of her indigo martial artist's vest beneath. A pair of combat-ready jeans hugged her waist, tucked neatly into brown-heeled boots that thudded lightly against the gravel as she dismounted. Mahito stood in front of her, arms crossed, a flicker of amusement hidden in his incredulous gaze. How did the elders get her to be the one to test me? Well, he could make a guess. Nanami might have figured out his technique as well, either that or Mimi told Gojo about his soul manipulation, and it was something that would greatly interest Yuki. So you're Tsukumo Yuki, he said at last. I've heard things. Yuki pulled off her helmet and shook her long blonde hair free. Two long tufts framed her face, brushing against her cheeks. Her wide brown eyes, lined by long lashes, narrowed slightly as she met his gaze. And you're the stray dog Gojo decided to adopt, she replied. That's what the elders think anyway. Mahito's smirk curved slightly. Very funny. She stepped closer, her boots crunching the gravel, as a strange, flying shikigami appeared from behind her, looking like a jagged spine with wings. First question. What kind of woman is your type? Mahito couldn't help but smile, glad that someone didn't care what he was for once. Not that Mimi was much different, but he was less of a curse or human to her, and more of a business opportunity at times. He knew how to give an answer from the heart to such an honest, soul-searching question. I am a man who appreciates the finer things in life. If a woman's got good hips and long legs, then I will always be interested. Yuki couldn't help but smile when hearing his response. Ho ho, such an honest answer. I already like you more than I like all of the elders combined. Did you also ask for their preferences? Mahito's, for once, was filled with genuine curiosity. After all, Tsukumo Yuki was not someone he was too familiar with. He only knew certain tics about her, knew that she rarely responded to calls from the elders or did any missions. Oh, I didn't. They're too old for their answers to be interesting to me. There's also no point in expecting an honest answer from them. Yuki shrugged before looking behind her to see her bike parked nearby. We're heading out. There's a possible special grade running wild near the outskirts of Tachijai. Something with a lightning-based technique. Dangerous, erratic, and completely unsealed. There are also a few missing people reported in the area. It's safe to assume the incidents are related. A perfect test case. She winked at Mahito before turning around, swaying her hips a bit before taking her helmets. And you want me to help kill it and find the missing people? Is that the extent of my mission? Mahito said, watching her with open curiosity. No, the elders likely just want you to die. But can't outright kill you because of Gojo, she said, adjusting her gloves. I want to see you in action. Since I am neutral, I got picked for the task. Gojo trusts you. May too, somehow. But I want to know exactly what you are. My opinion will also end up as the deciding factor for the elders. He gave a theatrical bow. Then I'll put on a good show. Yuki smiled widely before straddling her motorbike and putting on her helmet. Get on. We're doing this my way. Mahito hesitated, then climbed on behind her, resting cross-legged, slightly leaning against her back. The engine growled as she revved it, gravel spitting beneath the tires. They shot down the road in a blur of wind and fading sunlight. The ride stretched for hours. The countryside melted past in a blur of trees and hills, old shrines long forgotten tucked between rice fields. The air was clean here, distant from the cursed energy that clung to cities like fog. But the tension that hung between them was anything but quiet. It was a good type of tension, thankfully. Sometimes a passing driver would glance their way, but none seemed to notice Mahito. Some stared straight through him, eyes fixed on Yuki's backside instead. Much to the special grade curse's amusement. Mahito sat back to back with her, his own long blonde hair brushing against hers, strands tangling slightly in the wind. Neither of them moved to fix it. He wasn't entirely sure if it was intentional on her part, or his. You always ride like this? He asked, voice raised above the wind. Motorcycles are faster than the bureaucracy of the jujitsu world, Yuki replied without turning. And more fun. You seem different from the other sorcerers. Kinda like Gojo, not a stickler for rules, huh? That's because I am. I don't care for traditions. I care about results. She slowed slightly as the road narrowed to a dirt trail. And your technique, it may just be what I've been looking for. Mahito leaned forward, eyes scanning the horizon. Huh, you and plenty of others. It's nice to talk freely with someone so open about wanting to use me for my body. Yuki chuckled. Don't say it like that. Sounds dirty. He grinned against the wind. Oh, if you didn't like it, you would have just ignored me. The bickering carried on as the road stretched ahead, but rather than grating, it pulled them closer. Their odd chemistry just clicked. Eventually, they reached the edge of a rural forest village that had long since been evacuated. Crops still grew wild in the fields, untended. The wooden houses creaked in the wind, old paper windows rattling like bones. Power lines dipped low overhead, hissing softly. She stopped the bike. From here, we go on foot. They dismounted together. As Yuki adjusted the cuffs of her jacket, Mahito tilted his head toward the air. It's close, he said. The cursed energy here is a lot thicker than the rest of the nearby countryside. Almost like it's all flowing here. She flicked open a small tracking device, modified to sense residual cursed energy. The green light pulsed quickly, the rhythm almost like a heartbeat. It's nesting near the pylons, she said, eyes narrowing. Trying to feed off electricity? Maybe. Or maybe it just likes the noise. They moved together through the overgrown trail, their steps silent on the mossy path. Mahito kept pace easily, unbothered by the thick brush or the electric charge crackling faintly through the air. The cursed energy there was dense, a lot more so than in some parts of the city. It had always been said that the countryside was the calmest region, as there were fewer people around to manifest fear. The curses themselves were weaker due to it. But as Mahito had felt, the fear and resentment of many flowed within the area they were treading. As they reached the crest of a hill, the land opened up into a wide clearing. At the center stood a small substation, twisted and broken. The metal framework had melted in some places. Black scorch marks spidered across the ground like veins. The very color of the air around them changed, and Mahito quickly realized that they had entered the innate domain of that cursed spirit. And then they saw it. It stood tall, taller than most humans, humanoid in shape but wrong in every way. Its body was veined with lightning, with limbs far too long and lanky for it to be mistaken for a human. Lines of electric blue streaked under its unnaturally pale, cracked skin. Its eyes were empty sockets, glowing faintly. Its mouth hung open, and with each breath, a low hum filled the air, like the tension before a storm. Cables and wires slithered along its arms, trailing behind it like tails. Mahito stopped walking. So that's what we're hunting. Yuki narrowed her eyes. More like watching, in my case. You're not going to help. I'm here to evaluate. If you die, I'll step in. Maybe I'll even let you stare at my ass if you win. She paused, smirking slightly. Only if your technique is what I'm looking for. He gave her a sidelong glance, lips quirking. You really know how to motivate someone. I wield both the carrot and the stick. She stepped aside, just enough to give him room. Show me what your technique can really do. The cursed spirit's head snapped toward them. Lightning cracked across the sky, sudden and violent. Its chest opened slightly, revealing a core of roiling blue light. The humming grew louder, shaking the ground beneath them. Mahito rolled his shoulders, a sharp grin cutting across his face. Then let's dance. Yuki watched him step forward, her eyes narrowing with something sharper than calculation. Curiosity, maybe. Or something warmer, something dangerously close to interest. She had seen many curses, many sorcerers. But something about this one was different. And for the first time, she wondered. If Mahito survived this, what exactly could he become? Yuki watched from the edge of the clearing, arms folded as Mahito stepped forward into the cursed spirit's domain. It was easy to forget, looking at him from behind, that he wasn't human. The way he walked, casual and relaxed, was almost too confident. The way he spoke was with flippant humor, full of sarcasm and lazy charm. Even the way his hair caught in the wind, messy and golden, made him seem more like a bored delinquent than a being born of fear and hatred. That was the problem. He felt too human. She didn't like that. Yuki had spent years refining her theory, her purpose. She'd wandered the world chasing a solution to the curse plague. Her goal had always been simple: eliminate the root. Prevent the negative energy of humans from giving birth to these monsters in the first place. She wanted a world without curses. But Mahito complicated that. He laughed too easily. He flirted, teased, and prodded. He was curious. Even kind, in moments, or maybe it was just mimicry. And now he sat on Gojo's side, half free, half prisoner, casually straddling the line between ally and threat. It made her uneasy. Because if a curse like him could act so convincingly human, what did that mean for the rest of her belief system? The cursed spirit ahead of them shrieked. It only created a static-filled sound that made the hair on her arms rise. Lightning flickered again from its joints, casting jagged shadows across the blackened grass. Yuki's eyes narrowed. That thing was nothing like Mahito. It was a monster. No soul, no mind. Just reflexes and hatred. A spirit born of fear, untamed and unshaped. Still close to its infancy. And then Mahito moved. His speed was surprisingly fast. He blurred forward with a grin, his body melting into its fluid state mid-stride. His hand stretched unnaturally long, slamming into the cursed spirit's chest before its limbs could finish charging. The air exploded as its spine arched against Mahito's reinforced punch. The spirit shrieked again, stumbling back, electricity arcing violently from its cracked form. Mahito twisted midair, dodging one badly telegraphed bolt of lightning, then another, each movement impossibly clean. His body warped, segmented, stretching and coiling like a snake as he landed behind the cursed spirit. Yuki watched carefully, not blinking. Mahito didn't fight like a man. He didn't hesitate even when facing his own kind, and the way he could manipulate his body without flinching just felt unnatural. His movements were graceful, but wrong. It ruined the image of the relaxed person that she had been portraying the entire way there. His transfigurations rippled over his skin in real time, as if he were improvising mid-combat, reshaping muscle, bone, and sinew with surgical precision. It was to the level of art, in a way. But it wasn't human. The cursed spirit countered with a scream of blue lightning, crashing its lanky hand into the ground. Bolts spidered out in all directions, burning trees and carving trenches through soil. Mahito's body split. Literally. He cracked himself into three, forming jagged, humanoid copies from spare flesh. Each darted in a different direction, all laughing. It was nightmarish. Yuki had seen many curses. She'd exorcised more than she could count. But watching Mahito fight was unlike any of them. It was like watching someone dance through a battlefield without fear, without weight, without regard for injury. He was a force of nature, arrogant, beautiful, and cruel. He is worthy of the special grade classification. Many curses were placed within the special grade category, despite not being as strong. It was due to the amount of cursed energy within them. But real special grades stood out above all others, their techniques either destructive to their surroundings and sorcerers alike. At that moment, Yuki was looking at two designated special grade curses, but one of them was clearly dominating the battle. The lightning-based cursed spirit tried to catch him in a cage of electricity, but Mahito dropped into the ground like liquid before turning into many snakes that slithered out through a patch of broken earth behind it. One of his clones struck first, hitting the spirit's leg with a heavy, distorted arm, which looked more like a club. The second clone lunged for its throat. The third vanished entirely, popping like a bubble just as a bolt of lightning headed towards it. Mere bait, Yuki realized. The real Mahito reappeared above, jumping out of a cloud of dust and diving down like a falcon, his fingers intertwining and forming a jagged blade. The attack connected, and the special grade could barely even get the time to react due to how unpredictable its opponent was. The poor cursed spirit wailed, reeling back, its chest split and smoking. Cables burst from its body, trying to ensnare its opponent, but Mahito grinned and twisted mid-air, disassembling himself mid-motion into chunks that fell just out of range before reforming on the ground. He stood there for a moment, smiling. Covered in scorched marks, but untouched beneath them. A wide smile was still etched on his face. He was still enjoying it. It was because of that Yuki came to a realization. The elders had miscalculated. This was not an equivalent battle. Mahito had no chance of losing. Yuki felt something cold run down her spine. Not fear. Not quite. It was recognition. This was what Mahito really was. Not the boyish smirk. Not the charm. Not the witty deflections or sarcastic banter. Not the wind in his hair or the way he'd leaned against her back on the ride through the countryside. This was him. Something that should not exist. Something that fought like a monster, aiming only to rip and tear his enemies apart. She had been right. About curses. About her goal. Even if one of them could wear a smile and hold a conversation, the rest were nothing but death. Creatures built from sorrow and fear, bred only to spread it. Mahito spun, driving his hand into the cursed spirit's side again. His body twisted unnaturally as he reshaped the impact point, exploiting weaknesses in the spirit's core structure. Even so, he was not outright shredding the curse to pieces or trying to manipulate its soul. No, he was trying to achieve something else. "Don't fall asleep on me," he called, turning his head toward Yuki. "You're supposed to be evaluating, right?" She blinked. He was smiling again. Teeth bright. Eyes burning with chaotic excitement. Yuki was taken aback. For some reason, she wasn't weirded out by him, nor did she feel the need to change the way she spoke to him. "Just getting started. Don't disappoint me." She saw him pause for a second, the grin flickering into something more thoughtful, and then he turned back to the fight. His leg swept like a whip, sending the curse flying off, its back hitting a few trees before eventually hitting a metallic shack. The cursed spirit screamed again. The trees shook. Thunder split the sky overhead. A storm had gathered in the yellowish sky above them. Yuki didn't move. She simply watched. And as she did, she caught herself wondering something she shouldn't have. Not about the fight. Not about the outcome. But about him. Mahito. And while her mind was clouded, she was too distracted to notice something else. The curse that crawled up from the rubble of that metallic shed. It was holding onto someone else. Someone that she had failed to notice. An unconscious old man. "We're on to taking hostages, huh?" Mahito sighed. He didn't feel the measly cursed energy coming out of the old man due to the overwhelming intensity of the special grade curse. He was sure that Yuki was the same. Yuki herself couldn't help but scowl, feeling somewhat ashamed, but at the same time, intrigued. The old man in question was already on his dying breath. Even if saved, Yuki doubted he would survive long enough for emergency services to arrive. That meant this was a great opportunity for a test after all. How exactly is Mahito going to handle this? Mahito tilted his head, watching the old man hanging limply in the curse's grip. The flickering arcs of lightning lit up the deep lines on the man's face. Eyes clouded, chest rising only faintly. His body looked brittle enough that a stiff breeze might shatter it. "Really?" Mahito muttered, half to himself. "That's your bargaining chip?" The old man was barely clinging to life before the spirit even touched him. If this was intimidation, it was pathetic. From her position to the side, Yuki's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd seen enough hostage situations to know that, too. But she was somewhat hoping to see something else from Mahito. Something within her hoped that she would get to see a more human side of him. But even as a human, Mahito's view on life had always been a tad different from the norm. His mouth curled into a smirk. The contempt on his face was almost childlike. Humans decayed like fruit left in the sun. You could try to keep them intact, put them in a safe, cool space, to prevent them from spoiling too soon, but eventually, they all rotted. To Mahito, killing an old, dying man to take out the curse was a more than acceptable sacrifice. Still, something tugged at him. Not kindness. Just an itch. A curiosity. How easily can I heal people with my technique, I wonder? It was easy to break something, but could he bring something back from the brink of death? The old man's breaths were shallow, ragged, like paper tearing. Mahito's eyes traced the tremor in his fingers, the sag of his shoulders, and for a reason he didn't care to name, he stepped forward. Yuki's brow lifted slightly at that. "Mahito, don't be stupid. He may be dying, but that's still one of the missing people we were sent to investigate." He ignored her. The lightning spirit crackled in warning, arcs darting along its lanky limbs. The smell of ozone grew sharper, biting at the back of the throat. Mahito raised one hand, fingers curling toward the hostage's frail chest. The spirit reacted the instant skin touched skin. The air detonated with heat. The old man spasmed violently, back arched, as every nerve lit up with the curse's electricity. His body shook as it stood in between the two curses, steam curling from his mouth. Yuki's stance tightened, and cursed energy flickered out of her. For a fraction of a second, she thought Mahito might drop the man and let him die right there. It was over in less than a second. The man slumped, limbs slack. The acrid scent of burned fabric and singed hair coiled in the air. Mahito clicked his tongue. "Now look what you've done." He didn't sound angry. If anything, he was amused. His hand, still pressed to the man's chest, began to change. The texture softened, rippled, and sank inward. Idle transfiguration surged from him like ink through water. Muscles realigned. Veins reknit. The old man's heart, which had been seconds from giving up entirely, kicked back into rhythm under Mahito's coaxing. Skin smoothed where it had blistered, breath steadied. Yuki's eyes widened a fraction. She had already theorized from the few reports she had that his technique could heal as well as deform, but seeing it applied with such ease and precision, that was new. Her lips pressed together, hiding the fact that she was impressed. Then Mahito's hand brushed further, passing seamlessly through the old man's chest as if he were made of water. This seemed to take the other special grade by surprise, just enough to allow Mahito's palm to graze the curse's arm. Nothing. The soul beneath his touch was there, but not open to him. Bound tight under the spirit's cursed energy, like stone wrapped in iron. Mahito tilted his head. Interesting. Yuki caught the subtle shift in his tone. He wasn't just testing an opponent, he was cataloging. Filing away weaknesses and strengths. Mahito himself only now fought someone who could resist his idle transfiguration in base. Of course, were he to use his domain expansion, then the lighting special grade would surely die just as quickly as Hanami. But it was still interesting. The curse growled and hurled the old man away like trash, Mahito's hand slipping out of him as his chest and body seemed to return to a normal, healthy state. The man tumbled, weightless for a moment, before a large, spine-like shikigami surged upward to catch him. Yuki's shikigami. "Got him," she said. The shikigami's coils were gentle but firm, lowering the man to the grass. She didn't look away from Mahito or the curse for a second. But as the old man rested near her, she could tell. His breaths were steady, his heart was beating as strongly as that of a 30-year-old, his body appeared to be less burdened by age in general. He was going to live. Mahito didn't look back either. His focus was locked on the lightning curse. The smirk had faded, replaced by a sharp, intent calm. The arcs of electricity around the spirit grew frantic, with discharges coming faster. Its frame shifted, joints crackling audibly. Each arc collided with Mahito's body one by one. Burns and blisters filled the skin, which quickly turned charcoal underneath the overwhelming heat. Yet, what good would such attacks do? No matter how high the heat, it couldn't affect the soul. And the dull hints of pain that the burns were causing no longer hindered Mahito. He had adapted. Within a second, the burns and blisters vanished, his muscles stopped spasming, and his body returned to normal. But the lightning special grade was not done either. Rather, it seemed that he was charging up more and more as the skies above them grew angrier. Yuki could feel the shift in the air pressure, like the moment before a lightning strike. Her hand drifted toward her side, her fist clenched slightly, veins appearing all around her arm. But she did not step in yet. To her, it seemed that Mahito was taking more damage. And after she saw him heal that old man, she no longer agreed with the elder's decision to kill Mahito. There is some good in him. But Mahito was neither injured nor bothered by the situation. He had healed the old man on a whim, not putting much thought into it. He rolled his reformed shoulders. Let's see how much your cursed energy can really protect you. The curse lashed out first, a lattice of electricity that raced toward him. Mahito blurred sideways, parts of his body melted as he stepped through whatever gaps he could, his right hand already curling into a fist. That fist was radiating cursed energy. It was covered in an absurd amount of thick purple cursed energy, which seemed almost to engulf his entire arm. Yuki watched his approach, noting every subtle detail. The way his body aligned for the strike, the total absence of hesitation. Pure concentration. His movements were inhumanly fluid, yet all the more precise. She could feel the spike in cursed energy before the blow even landed. When it did, the sound was like glass breaking underwater. Within 1/1,000,000th of a second from contact, space itself seemed to fold and distort around in front of Mahito's fist. The air buckled under the sudden alignment of cursed energy, will, and timing. Black flash. The blow detonated through the spirit's chest, completely destroying its form and sending it skidding back in a spray of dirt and splintered wood. Thunder split the sky overhead as if the world itself reacted. Mahito straightened, lowering his hand. A faint tingle lingered in his fingers, and his smile this time was genuine. At that moment, he could finally see it. That which he had failed to do before. The true nature of cursed energy. It was exhilarating. Landing a black flash would transform a newbie jujitsu sorcerer into a seasoned veteran. But what about someone like Mahito, who was entirely constructed by cursed energy? Well, it just helped him gain a better understanding of himself altogether. Within that exhilaration, he couldn't help but boast, his blonde hair flowing in the wind as he turned to glance toward Yuki. Your evaluation just went up a notch, right? She didn't answer immediately. Her shikigami hovered protectively over the old man, whose breathing was strong and steady. Her eyes stayed on Mahito, watching the way he carried himself after the strike. Finally, she smirked. Maybe. Keep it up. Mahito turned back to the spirit, whose form was still sparking and twitching as it struggled to rise. The grin on his face deepened. Yuki remained still, arms folded. In her mind, two thoughts battled. One was the certainty that Mahito was dangerous beyond even her first impression. The other was a reluctant acknowledgement, he was fascinating to watch. And he had a pretty nice smile. For a moment, she forgot the hostage, the countryside, even her own mission. All she could see was the strange, lethal rhythm in the way he moved. Unfortunately for her, the fight was about to end quickly enough. After a black flash. I feel like I can make it even stronger. I can see it. A different path I have yet to walk. Now then. Let's see you block this. Mahito moved in a strange manner, his body growing a multitude of hands from his back, each making distinctive hand signs. Each hand had a mouth, chanting a rather ominous melody. And with many mouths at once, something different echoed out, more recognizable. Domain expansion cursed genesis. The chanting rolled from Mahito's many mouths in an eerie, layered harmony. It wasn't the frantic, desperate incantation of a cornered fighter, it was deliberate, methodical, each note resonating in the air like a drumbeat before a storm. The lightning special grade, still smoldering from the black flash, twitched and spat arcs of electricity, the static crawling along the grass in angry ripples. Yuki could feel the shift before she saw it, the air thickened, the temperature warped, and cursed energy began to knot itself around Mahito like an intricate weave. Her eyes narrowed. He's doing it again. She murmured under her breath. She knew that she was about to witness his domain expansion herself. The ground around them seemed to ripple outward, invisible waves emanating from Mahito's position. There was no crackling shell of a barrier, no enclosed, warped space folding into itself. At least not in any visible sense. The horizon didn't bend or seal itself off. Instead, the air cleared. It was unnerving. Domain expansion, Mahito's voice carried, not shouted but laced with an authority that made the words settle in Yuki's bones. Cursed Genesis. The world didn't change. It simply shifted. Everything within 100 meters in all directions, twice the reach of his original domain, was his now. Yuki's brow furrowed as she realized exactly what he'd done. No wall, no overt visual separation. He'd layered a binding vow into the very expansion, shaving away the defensive barrier in exchange for raw, oppressive scale and seamless integration with the real world. Almost barrierless. That thought scraped uncomfortably across her mind. Even for a special grade, that kind of control was almost divine. He had forsaken any defensive aspects of a usual domain expansion. The barrier that surrounded it was so thin that it could be disregarded altogether. I am close, so close to a barrierless domain, but not yet. Not today, it seems. Mahito sighed internally. He did not let his thoughts deprive him of the excitement he felt in the moment. The lightning spirit hissed, its cursed energy flaring, as if sensing that invisible claim being stamped into reality. It crackled backwards, trying to run away and escape the domain. But Mahito's expression didn't shift, only his eyes gleamed, focused and unblinking. Careful, this thing's annoyingly fast. Don't let it get away, she called out, her voice a measured warning. Mahito only smirked. No need to worry. I've accounted for that. And then, she felt it. Not just the domain's oppressive reach, the pull. It wasn't physical. It was something more spiritual in nature, like the sensation of standing too close to the lip of a massive drop. Yuki herself felt drawn to the center of the domain, though she was able to cool her mind rather quickly thanks to her willpower, and the simple domain she employed around herself and the old man. But not everyone had her willpower. From the curse's chest, something shifted. Not muscle, not flesh, its soul. Mahito's technique snared it like a fisherman's hook, tugging without haste. Yuki's eyes widened. He can manipulate souls to this extent. Inside the domain, Mahito's rules were absolute. The chanting that had begun as a ritualistic flourish was, in truth, a second binding vow. A vow ensuring that, while he could draw another being's soul into his own, as long as they were within his domain. With the caveat that their personalities could overwrite his if his willpower was not strong enough. It was a trade. A dangerous, almost arrogant one. But he'd balanced it. Making yet another binding vow. Mahito stepped forward, closing the distance one smooth stride at a time. The lightning special grade lashed out, arcs of searing electricity snapped across the field, splitting the air with their heat. But now, inside the refined domain, its struggles meant nothing. He didn't need to. The strikes hit him, or rather, they entered him. His form rippled like liquid, his soul structure bending and knitting around each impact. Burns flared and faded instantly, muscles knitting back together before they'd even torn fully apart. You're feeding me, Mahito said plainly, his voice almost conversational as the spirit struck again and again. I like that. Then his hand pierced straight through the curse's chest. No resistance, the soul was no longer a fortress, here, it was an unlocked door. Yuki could see it happening now, in the subtle warp of cursed energy between them. Threads of lightning-bright power unspooled from the spirit's core and coiled inward toward Mahito, threading into him, disappearing beneath his skin like rainwater into sand. His body arched slightly, eyes closing for half a second. When they opened again, faint arcs of pale electricity skated across his fingertips. Yuki let out a slow exhale. He's absorbing it. True, Mahito corrected, his voice taking on an almost teacher-like cadence. An application of my powers, it seems. The curse screamed, a sound that vibrated the teeth in Yuki's jaw. It tried to tear free, limbs flailing with desperate power, but Mahito's grip wasn't physical anymore, it was soul-deep, unshakable inside the domain's rules. You can thrash all you want, Mahito murmured, tilting his head slightly, but this body, this technique, both are mine until your cursed energy burns out. Don't worry, I won't keep them. I'm not greedy. Just curious. Yuki's eyes widened, she felt her back filling with sweat as she finally realized. Mahito was learning in real time. Every move, every exchange, every fraction of cursed energy was filed away into that strange, inhuman understanding of his. The lightning special grade's resistance faltered, its arcs becoming stutters instead of steady discharges. Mahito leaned in, his hands sinking deeper, until half his forearm seemed embedded in the curse's flickering torso. This cursed technique, Mahito said quietly, almost like a compliment. Then his expression sharpened. I'll take it. The spirit's form began to collapse inward, its cursed energy unraveling like thread pulled from a spool. The arc sputtered and died in the air, drawn into Mahito until nothing remained but silence and the faint smell of ozone. When the last wisp of energy vanished into him, Mahito withdrew his hand. The domain dissolved in the same moment, no crash of a barrier shattering, no dramatic implosion. It simply ceased to be, like a dream fading upon waking. The field was just a field again. Mahito flexed his fingers slowly, watching pale blue-white sparks coil lazily around them. The arcs traced the lines of his knuckles, dancing briefly before fading into his skin. Yuki's shikigami still hovered protectively over the old man, who now stirred slightly, murmuring something incoherent. She didn't take her eyes off Mahito. You've gotten stronger, just like that, she said at last. It wasn't a question, more like stating a fact. One that the elders of the jujitsu world were bound to dread. Mahito's smile was calm, almost satisfied, but there was a glint in it, a spark that matched the arc still ghosting his fingertips. Not stronger, he corrected, looking down at his hand. Just more enlightened. He let the electricity snap once more between his fingers, a single, clean crackle, before lowering his arm. Now then. How would you grade my performance, Miss Special Grade? The council chamber smelled faintly of old wood and incense. A semicircle of elders sat at an elevated dais, their expressions carved in the same weathered stone as the walls behind them. Banners bearing the crests of the clans hung motionless in the stale air, and in the center of the floor stood Yuki Tsukumo. She bowed her head just enough to acknowledge their authority without surrendering to it. One of the oldest men present adjusted his robes and said, Special Grade Tsukumo. Your report. Yuki's voice was steady, stripped of any flourish. The mission to eliminate the Lightning Affinity Special Grade Cursed Spirit was successful. I was assigned oversight of Mahito, acting under Gojo Satoru's permission, to assess his capabilities. During the engagement, a civilian hostage was taken, an elderly man. Mahito engaged directly, shielded the man, and healed him instantly upon contact. A murmur rippled through the elders. One of the Zenin clan representatives leaned forward, skeptical. Healed? You're certain? Yes, Yuki replied without hesitation. Immediate and complete restoration. No residual injury. It was done through direct contact, without the use of reverse curse technique as far as I could detect. An Ino clan elder narrowed his eyes. That's certainly not in his nature. Yuki let the remark pass. Following that, Mahito initiated a domain expansion. It spanned roughly 100 meters in radius, double his previously recorded capacity. The structure was unconventional. Almost transparent barrier, not made to hold anything in or out, almost seamless with the surrounding environment. Inside, his control over soul manipulation was absolute. He was able to draw in and extract the special grade's curse technique upon defeating it. The chamber fell into a hush. Finally, a Kamo elder broke it. A cursed spirit with adaptive growth, mastery of soul manipulation, and the ability to absorb techniques. His lips thinned into a grim line. Gojo is already a problem. Now he fosters this. Yuki's gaze didn't waver. Mahito is evolving at a pace I've never seen before. His domain was refined, deliberate, and inhumanly precise. It is starting to look unnatural. And if he continues on this trajectory, he will become something that not even the standard special grade classification will fit. The tension in the air thickened. Some elders shifted uncomfortably, others masked their unease behind neutral expressions. "This is dangerous," an elder from the Gakuganji school muttered. "We cannot allow another figure outside our control with that level of power." Another countered, "If he remains under Gojo's watch, perhaps we can dash." "Gojo Satoru answers to no one," the Kamo elder snapped. "And neither will this Mahito if we are not careful." The Zenin representative spoke next, voice measured but edged with contempt. "Two uncontrollable annoyances, one human, one curse, both under the same banner. It will upset the balance that's kept our clans in power for generations." One of the quieter elders finally said, "Then we make our stance clear. Mahito remains under Gojo's supervision, but with regular oversight from special grade Tsukumo. If his actions stray from acceptable limits, she is to act immediately to exorcise him." Several nods followed, though not all were in agreement. The vote was quick, but the undercurrent of fear was undeniable. They were not just afraid of Mahito. They were afraid of what he represented, proof that Gojo's vision of the future was already taking shape. Yuki kept her posture relaxed, hands loosely at her sides. She gave no sign of the thoughts she held back, the image of Mahito's calm smile after absorbing the lightning curse, the strange glint in his eyes that didn't quite belong to a monster. When the meeting was adjourned, she walked out into the cool hallway without looking back. She felt glad. She had the perfect excuse to keep in touch with Mahito and explore his technique further. Yeah. That was all it was. The afternoon light over Tokyo Jujitsu High was almost blinding after the shadows of the council chamber. Mahito followed Gojo through the open gates, his eyes flicking from the training yards to the weathered dormitory walls. "And over here," Gojo said, his voice carrying that easy, sing-song lilt, "we have the training field. Nice, open, perfect for working out all your frustrations without breaking the good china." Mahito's gaze lingered on the sparring second-year students in the distance. They froze mid-practice when they saw him, their stances faltering as whispers began to ripple. Gojo noticed but didn't slow his pace. "Ignore the staring. They'll get used to you. Or they won't. Either way, you'll get plenty of space to yourself." "I don't mind an audience," Mahito said lightly, scanning the grounds. "It's fun to see how people react." "Right," Gojo replied with a wide smile, clearly amused by the whole situation. However, he still felt the need to add something else. "Just remember, fights are off-limits for you unless they're volunteering." "I mean it. Of course. Not that I'd ever fight seriously against fledgling sorcerers." Mahito was not bothered by that rule one bit. They passed by the kitchen, the library, and the old stone staircase leading to the faculty offices. Gojo narrated each landmark like a tour guide at an amusement park, dropping in the occasional warning masked as a joke. "This is the main dorm building. Hot water's limited, so you might want to take your showers at night. Also, don't eat Panda's snacks unless you're ready for a fight you can't win." Mahito smiled, slightly amused at the prospect of Panda attacking a special grade curse for stealing his snacks. Eventually, Gojo stopped in front of a small detached building at the edge of the grounds. He fished a key out of his pocket and tossed it without looking. Mahito caught it smoothly. Your quarters. Not bad, huh? Plenty of privacy and peace. You'll be fine here. Mahito looked at the door, then back at Gojo, his smile slow and unreadable. Peace is nice, but I'm more interested in the opportunity to spar with you. Gojo adjusted his blindfold slightly, grinning. Oh, you'll get it, that's for certain. He had also read Yuki's reports. He was curious about clashing domains with Mahito by that point. Before Mahito could reply, the sound of voices cut through from the courtyard behind them, quick, familiar tones. They turned as Yuji Itadori, Megumi Fushiguro, and Nobara Kujisaki came into view. "Ho, I'd better take my leave. I bet you have plenty to talk about with my students. Bye-bye." Gojo disappeared just like that, vanishing into thin air, but Mahito was sure that he was still watching one way or another. Alas, it was going to take a while before Gojo left him out of his gaze. Yuji's expression shifted the moment he recognized Mahito. There was no hostility in it, but a wariness tempered with something almost like relief. "So, you're really here. Thought I'd only see you again in another fight." Mahito's grin widened, faint amusement curling in his tone. "And yet here I am, on friendly terms. Fate strange, isn't it?" Yuji nodded slightly. "You helped us against that forest curse. I haven't forgotten that." Kujisaki stepped forward, arms crossed but eyes bright with curiosity. "You also helped me against that weirdo. Didn't think I'd be saying this to a curse, but, thanks." Mahito tilted his head, his voice just a shade lighter. "You're welcome, though I don't recall doing it for gratitude." He didn't feel the need to put up appearances anymore. He was just being himself. Megumi, however, didn't relax. His gaze stayed fixed on Mahito, his cursed energy already subtly shifting beneath the surface. "Gojo-sensei may trust you. But I'll still keep an eye on you." Mahito just smiled when hearing that, slightly amused. "Don't worry about it. Besides, Gojo himself is keeping an eye on me." Megumi didn't look convinced. His eyes narrowed slightly, and Mahito could feel something strange revolving within his soul, ominous and rhythmic. "If you are dangerous, I won't hesitate, even if it costs my life." The air grew heavier at that, the implied threat settling between them. Mahito only chuckled. "You'd go that far? Interesting." It wasn't shocking, rather, he was surprised that Megumi hadn't threatened to summon Maharaga during their first encounter. The young sorcerer did it so much to the point where it was almost like a muscle reflex. It certainly hindered his growth. Yuji glanced at Megumi, tension flickering in his tone. "Hey! Lighten up, he's been nothing but friendly up to this point." Kujisaki smirked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're no fun, Fushiguro. Let's see what he does first before you threaten to blow yourself up or something." "It's fine to be wary, I don't mind." Mahito shook his head, still smiling as if he hadn't just been threatened. Still, he couldn't help but leave Megumi with one last comment. "Don't be so trigger-happy. Value your life a little." Still, as Mahito turned toward his quarters, he could feel Megumi's eyes on his back, watchful, ready, and maybe a little confused. This is going to be fun," Mahito smiled internally as he finally stepped into his quarters. The training field at Tokyo Jujutsu High was quiet in the early afternoon, save for the rustle of wind through the surrounding trees and the occasional creak of the wooden viewing stands. It was a deceptive calm, the kind that carried the faint scent of challenge in the air. Mahito stood near the center, rolling his shoulders and tilting his head in an easy stretch. His gaze drifted over the sparring dummies, the scored earth, and the faint scent of sweat and scorched energy in the air. He chuckled under his breath. "Didn't even take a full day before I was accosted for a spar." Across from him, Maki Zenin tightened the wrap on her hands. Her eyes were steady and unreadable behind her glasses, but her posture carried the kind of quiet tension he associated with people who were constantly pushing themselves against an invisible wall. On the field, Panda and Inumaki were also watching, almost as if they were prepared to jump in if Mahito did something strange. But their interference wouldn't be necessary today. "It's not every day we get a special grade curse hanging around the school grounds," she said bluntly. "If there's a chance to measure myself, I'm not going to waste it." Mahito's lips curved. "Measure yourself, or prove something?" Maki's jaw shifted slightly, but she didn't flinch. "Both. My reasons don't concern you. But you are strong, not as overwhelming as Gojo, but stronger than everyone else around." The conviction in her voice caught his attention. He'd met plenty of sorcerers and cursed spirits, but few carried ambition with that kind of focus. And he already knew that what came out of her mouth was not just empty words. He knew what she would end up doing in the future. "I see," he said, his tone softening in amusement. "I think I like that answer." They took their stances, the air between them growing still. Maki moved first, her body a blur of physical precision, no cursed energy reinforcing her strikes, only raw, conditioned power. She wielded a real spear, a cursed weapon from the armory. This was also one of the reasons why she wanted to spar with Mahito. To fight with a real weapon, not just a stick. Her first attack was a simple thrust, her sharpened spearhead heading straight for Mahito's midsection. But such a simple attack wouldn't so easily land on someone like Mahito. Without even hesitating, he leaned backwards, one of his feet shooting upwards to kick the hilt of the spear in one fluid motion. Maki wasn't even fazed by this either. Her spear twirled and immediately swiped, trying to leave the slightest mark on Mahito's ankle. But the shape-shifting special grade curse already knew she was a capable fighter. In an instant, he pulled his leg back, causing only a slight scratch to appear on it. First strike very good. He did not go all out, nor did he use his full speed or curse technique. Instead, he decided to train his martial arts for once. Before Maki could even comment, his palm thrust right toward her abdomen, a strike she quickly moved to block, her spear twirling around as the hilt came in contact with Mahito's palm. The sheer force behind it sent her skidding on the ground, momentum which she used to roll and thrust her spear towards her opponent's head, going straight for the kill. Mahito jumped, raising his leg into an axe kick as he pushed the head of the spear into the dirt with a smile on his face. Maki quickly tried to pull her weapon back, but even with her heavenly restriction-enhanced strength, she struggled heavily. She almost fell backwards when Mahito's leg lifted, performing a high kick right towards her head. The hit landed right on her cheek, sending her tumbling on the grounds of their makeshift arena, raising up a small cloud of dust. On the side, Panda tensed uncomfortably. While Inumaki narrowed his eyes, his expression quite serious as he muttered, "Fish cake." Maki immediately rolled to her feet, a red and blue bruise forming on her cheek, while a deranged smile also appeared on her lips. She was concerned at first, but now at least she didn't have to worry anymore. Mahito was not one to take it easy on her because she was a woman. Rather, his kick felt heavy enough to kill any regular human, and even some weaker sorcerers. Her spear was no longer with her, but she was not dissuaded. Instead, she used her speed to immediately dash towards the special grade curse, who kicked up her spear and started wielding it with a stance similar to her own. She slid in under his guard, leg whipping in a low arc. He deflected it using the hilt of the spear, before turning it and aiming the blunt end right for her head. She donkey rolled just in time to avoid that crushing blow, which immediately went on to break the concrete and dirt at the point of contact. Maki sweated a bit, although she dodged successfully. If Mahito had used the longer, sharpened end of the spear, then she would have been pierced right through, impaled into the ground like a post fence. Mahito twirled the spear, motion similar to Maki's own as he created a gust of wind powerful enough to blow the dust away. "You rely on speed to bridge the gap," Mahito remarked conversationally as she slid back a step. "Good, but predictable." Easy to counter for someone who can match your speed. And predictability gets you killed. Maki's eyes narrowed. That determined smile never left her lips. At that point, she had completely forgotten what she was facing. Then help me become more unpredictable. Her excitement made him laugh. It was short but genuine. He threw her spear back with a smile on his face. All right. And he obliged. For the next few hours, the field rang with the thud of footfalls, the solid crack of strikes meeting parries, and the occasional dull smack when Mahito redirected her attacks into the dirt. He never unleashed idle transfiguration, not even using it to reinforce his body. He only used cursed energy. Yet it was obvious to both of them who was dictating the pace. Still, Maki adapted. She read his feints faster, pushed harder on the few moments he gave her an opening. Her stubbornness was palpable, and he found himself impressed by her refusal to let frustration cloud her control. Finally, after a particularly sharp exchange that ended with her elbow a hair's breadth from his ribs before he trapped her arm, Mahito stepped back and dropped his stance entirely. Enough. Maki straightened, breathing hard but still sharp-eyed. Her body was filled with bruises, injuries that were painful, but not serious. Mahito had not taken it easy on her. She was exhausted to the point where, when she realized that the fight was over, she lay down on the broken and battered training grounds. She sounded ragged as she was taking hungry, deep breaths, one after another. At some point, Panda and Inumaki had walked off, realizing that Mahito was not going to seriously harm her. So it was just the two of them now. You've got talent, Mahito said, tone frank. And willpower. I could make you stronger. Much, much stronger. Her brow rose. Stronger how? She was not interested in shortcuts, but it was safe to say she was intrigued. She was already somewhat trusting of Mahito after she had gotten to see how he behaved in combat. He had shown her he was both well-meaning and highly capable. He tilted his head. Using my technique. Only with Gojo's permission. It wouldn't be simple, or safe. Her curiosity broke through her suspicion. Explain. Mahito's voice dropped, slow and measured. Your soul isn't entirely yours. It's tied to someone else. Your twin, I believe I've met her before, too. That connection binds you both, limits you both. I can try to cut it. Her eyes widened despite the exhaustion, fists clenching at her sides. If it works, he continued, your heavenly restriction would fully manifest. Your body would potentially reach its absolute physical peak. Your sister, her limitations would lift as well. Her cursed energy reserve seemed quite low, I assumed they would rise quite a bit. She weighed him carefully. And if the procedure fails? Not sure, he admitted, with no hesitation. This would be a high risk. Twins are already an anomaly in the jujitsu world. I can't guarantee what will happen if it doesn't work. Silence fell between them, broken only by the wind. Maki's mind was rolling around, her eyes seemed a bit frantic. The prospect of cutting the bond between twins which chained down both her and Mai was beyond tempting to her. Any lesser man would likely even end up using this against her. But Mahito was no such man. He was more of a curious soul. A good chance to experiment, and if it works, both sisters will owe me. The Zenin clan already hates me anyway, they hate anything different after all. The late afternoon sun was warm but unyielding, spilling through the tall windows of Gojo's office in a golden wash. The light caught drifting motes of dust in the air, each one turning lazily in the stillness. It should have been a comfortable scene, yet Maki Zenin stood rigid in the middle of the room, hands clasped loosely behind her back. Her posture was measured, her tone ready. I want to take my leave, she said. Her voice held no hesitation. I'm going to Kyoto. To see my sister. Gojo's chair creaked as he leaned back, one arm draped over the backrest, the other idly drumming his fingers against the armrest. And this is about what Mahito told you? You're really considering it? There was no point in denying it. Maki nodded once. He says he can cut the connection between us, she continued. If it works, we both get stronger. If it fails. Her eyes didn't waver. We deal with the fallout. Gojo's grin faltered just slightly, replaced with a sharper gaze. You understand how dangerous that is, right? I do. He studied her for a moment longer, as if testing whether her words were posturing or truth. So, what, are you asking me for permission? I'm telling you what I'm going to do. As always, I expect you to support my decision, she replied flatly. That earned her a low, amused chuckle. Fair enough. But here's the thing. You may not need my approval for this. The choice is yours, Maki. Just know that if it blows up in your face, there's no undoing it. And I won't be able to punish Mahito either. He only made a proposal, that's the beginning and end of it. That's the point, she said without flinching. The grin came back, though softer this time. A fully awakened physical heavenly restriction. He leaned back, eyes narrowing underneath his blindfold as some distant memory flickered behind them. Reminds me of the only man to have gotten close to killing me. The name went unspoken. Maki hadn't ever heard about such a thing, but she dared not ask either, despite the curiosity gnawing at her. The weight of it lingered in the air between them. Maki inclined her head. Then you understand why I have to try. All the more reason to go ahead with the procedure. Gojo tilted his head, finally waving her off with a lazy gesture. Go, then. Just don't make me regret backing you. She left without another word. The air outside was cooler, carrying the faint smell of pine from the trees lining the path. But it didn't cut through the tight coil in her chest. Convincing Gojo had been the easy part. Convincing Mai would be something else entirely. Her sister had never fought against the clan's expectations. She had no ambitions to challenge the Zenin's authority over her autonomy, no drive to claw her way up from the shadow they had been born into. For Mai, survival was enough. Maki could already hear her scoffing. Why risk everything for some hypothetical gain? Why push for more when you could just live quietly? But Maki had lived that life before. And she knew that it was no way to live at all. Mahito's offer was dangerous, untested, and maybe even foolish. But it was also the first credible path forward she'd ever had. As she was, she would only eventually get stuck as a second-grade or first-grade sorcerer for the rest of her life. If it worked, Mai would also be free of her limitations, her cursed technique no longer strangled by the weight of her restriction. And Maki, her own heavenly restriction would finally stand at its full, unchained potential. She would, from Gojo's own words, have the potential of a special-grade sorcerer, without any cursed energy at all. She had no illusions about the risk. Twins were already an anomaly in the jujitsu world, and tampering with their connection wasn't something that could be reversed. The fact that it could even be attempted was a miracle in itself. But the alternative was to keep living as they had been, separate halves of something neither of them could name, shackled by an invisible bond neither asked for. Her boots crunched over the gravel path, taking her past the open stretch of the training field. Below, the sound of blows being exchanged echoed sharply and steadily against the quiet afternoon. She glanced toward the source, catching sight of Mahito facing Yuji across the scarred earth. The inexperienced boy's stance was low and tight, his movements charged with intent. Whatever had happened on his last mission had burned away any restraint, he wasn't holding back. Kujisaki sat a short distance away, her wheelchair angled toward the match. Arms crossed, jaw set, she didn't look like someone who had lost the use of her legs. The medics had said there was nothing wrong with her body. The damage was deeper. Megumi was still confined to the infirmary, leaving the field feeling oddly incomplete. Maki lingered only a moment longer before moving on. Mahito sighed as he parried a punch from Yuji, feeling the aftershock of divergent fist as he kneed the young sorcerer into the gut and sent him tumbling to the side, only for him to get up once more. Yuji was like that. He had the endurance to call himself a protagonist of a battle shounen series after all. But at the moment, he seemed to be fighting with both determination and frustration. And none of it was directed at his opponent. He was looking elsewhere, seemingly. Despite his gaze being focused, he seemed to look beyond Mahito himself. He is fighting to change his fate, huh? To grow to the point where he wouldn't have to feel helpless again. Whatever happened in their latest mission, it diverted from the original story a lot. On the field, Mahito's attention shifted briefly mid-exchange, eyes flicking toward Kujisaki, not at her body, but further. Beneath the surface, he saw it. A foreign shape carved into her soul, the mark deliberate and precise. Kenjaku's work. It was a lock, a restriction woven directly into her soul, severing her from her body's natural function. Breaking it would require exacting manipulation of the soul itself. And doing so would almost certainly alert the one who had put it there. Mahito's grin was slight, unreadable, even as he parried Yuji's next strike. So. He wants to confirm my technique once and for all? Cute. Yuji's fists blurred in another rush, determination boiling over into motion. Mahito met him cleanly, their strikes cracking the air between them. Sukuna's vessel was one of the few people who could injure him at that time, so a spar with him was actually quite fun for the special grade curse. Kujisaki's gaze never left the exchange. She was silent, but her grip on the armrest of her wheelchair had tightened. The fight stretched on, blows ringing through the empty grounds, while, far beyond the school gates, Maki's figure was already a fading silhouette against the horizon. She didn't look back. Kyoto was waiting. And so was the choice that could change both her life and her sister's forever. The day had been long in the way only idle days could be, the kind where nothing truly important happened, yet time refused to move faster. Mahito had spent the morning in the training grounds, circling Panda in a slow dance of trial and error. The cursed corpse's blows were heavy, the kind that rattled through bone even if you blocked cleanly, and Panda's personality was every bit as broad as his frame. The spar had started with a challenge, Panda's usual brand of good-natured ribbing, and had quickly shifted into something more serious. Mahito didn't need to use his curse technique to win, but he did have to respect the way Panda moved. The bear's footwork was deceptively light, his fists finding their way through gaps Mahito left open on purpose, just to see how Panda would take them. Panda fought with all his forms before the session ended, and Mahito noted each shift, Triceratops-like brute strength, gorilla mode seemingly uncontrollable aggression, filing them away in that quiet corner of his mind where he kept anything remotely interesting. The shift to the Triceratops core was the most unusual one to Mahito, an almost complete shift in both abilities and strength. It did not provide just strength, however. Gorilla mode's unblockable drumming beat packed a stronger punch, strong enough to blow holes into the training grounds. It was also deployed faster. But the Triceratops provided an uncanny endurance, and another strange ability which allowed Panda to absorb impacts and release the stored force into a rather devastating bull rush, putting his newly grown horns to good use. Mahito learned from them, trying to figure out ways he could incorporate those techniques into his own creations. In the end, they'd both walked off the field with a rather clear victor. Mahito had not even broken a sweat, but Panda was exhausted beyond belief. Regardless, it hadn't been about who won. The spar was a conversation, and Mahito had learned enough. By afternoon, the noise of the match had faded into the stillness of the grounds. The clouds hung low, the light thinning into the softer edges of evening. That was when he saw her once more. Kujisaki Nobara sat alone near the far wall, her wheelchair angled toward the empty dirt of the training field. She didn't fidget or sigh, she just sat there, as if keeping watch over something no one else could see. Her body was intact. Mahito had already studied her from a distance. The damage was deeper, bound into the shape of her soul. And he could see it. The brand that Kenjaku had placed. Mahito's lips twitched faintly upward. He could break it. He could make her walk again before the sun finished setting. But why? The question wasn't cruel, not to Mahito. It was honest. From Kenjaku's point of view, Mahito was already rehabilitated, a curse-turned-pet project of Gojo Satoru. He'd saved Yuji on more than one occasion, spared Kujisaki from Haruta, and fought alongside sorcerers against other curses. Jogo's reports and other rumors would have carried that narrative far enough for Kenjaku to believe it. And if that were true, what would be the most natural thing for him to do? Heal her. Prove his value. Cement his role as a trusted member of Gojo's circle. But he didn't really need to strengthen his standing any further. He was already planning to do that by helping Maki, someone with much more potential to be useful in the future. Mahito let his gaze wander past her, toward the edge of the field where the trees cast long shadows. If I heal her now, Kenjaku will know for sure. He'll confirm my technique's actual purpose. Information like that wasn't something you just gave away. His reasoning was simple: there was no reward worth the risk right now. The soft crunch of footsteps on gravel pulled him from his thoughts. Gojo Satoru didn't so much approach as arrive, his presence washing into the space before his voice did. "Mahito," he said, easy as ever, though there was a subtle tension in it. "Need a word?" Mahito glanced over, the lazy half-smile already in place. "About what?" Gojo stopped a few paces away, his hands buried in his pockets, shoulders loose in a deliberate way. "Nobara. Think you can help her?" Mahito tilted his head, letting the silence stretch. "Help how?" "You know exactly how," Gojo said. The usual playfulness had thinned, leaving something heavier underneath. "Whatever's wrong with her isn't physical. That's your speciality." Mahito rose from the steps in one slow motion. "I can take a look." Gojo stepped aside, gesturing with a small tilt of his head. "Be my guest." Kujisaki's eyes followed him as he crouched beside her, but she said nothing. Mahito didn't bother looking at her face, he was focused on the thing beneath it, on the brand's fine edges and the way it bit into her. It would be so easy to strip it away. Instead, he frowned faintly. "It's more complicated than it looks. There's a barrier wound directly into her soul. Like a tripwire. If I force it open, it might kill her." Gojo's jaw worked behind the blindfold. "Might?" Mahito straightened. "I don't have much experience with barriers, but removing one directly tied to the soul may have adverse effects." The special grade curse dusted his hands as if the matter was already settled. "If it were me, I wouldn't risk it. The odds aren't in her favor." Kujisaki didn't speak, but her fingers tightened on the armrests of her chair. It was impossible to tell how she felt in that moment, but Mahito could feel the sorrow rolling in the depths of her soul. It didn't concern him. She was not determined enough to give her life away for a chance to walk again. She had other things she wanted to do with her life, people she hadn't managed to meet just yet. Maybe one day. That was all she thought before she turned her wheelchair around on her own and left. Neither Mahito nor Gojo stopped her. Gojo exhaled, a slow breath that seemed to pull his shoulders down a fraction. "All right. If that's the situation, she'll have to make that decision on her own." He turned, walking off without another word. Mahito watched him go, that same faint smirk tugging at his mouth. He'd played it well, given just enough truth to make the lie believable. The reality was simple: he could have fixed her in a heartbeat. But nothing had changed for him, not really. He still only moved when there was something to be gained. If Gojo, or Kujisaki herself, ever found a way to offer him something worth the trouble, maybe then he'd remove the mark. Until then, she would remain as she was. Keeping Kenjaku in the dark was important for now. He was bound to eventually learn of his technique, but it would no longer matter by that point. Mahito was already confident in his growth, confident in fighting anyone from Kenjaku to Gojo, to even Sukuna. Of course, winning and fighting were vastly different terms. The grounds fell quiet again, the horizon fading into the deep blue of oncoming night. Mahito leaned back against the steps, eyes half-lidded, letting the thought drift away like smoke, as he turned back to his previous musings about his still-growing personal army. In the end, it always came back to the same rule, no matter what world he lived in. Help was never free. The tea between them had gone cold, but neither sister seemed to notice. Maki sat opposite Mai in the dim corner of the Kyoto dormitory's lounge, elbows on her knees, leaning forward like every word she spoke was part of a fight she refused to lose. Mai lounged back on the couch with her usual guarded posture, eyes half-lidded, arms crossed, but the slight tremor in her foot betrayed the tension that never really left her. "You know I never wanted this either," Maki said finally, voice low. "But I wasn't going to let them decide how far I'd go." Mai gave a short laugh, bitter but quiet. "So you decided to fight the tide head-on. Congratulations. At least I picked the smarter route and didn't drown." "You call this smart?" Maki gestured at her sister, at the neat uniform, the perfect posture drilled into her by the Zenin clan's suffocating rules. "Living under their heel? Waiting for them to tell you who to marry, where to live, how to breathe?" Mai's gaze flicked away. For a long moment, the sound of rain tapping against the window filled the space between them. "It's better than fighting until I break," she murmured. "At least this way, I get to choose the moments I want to enjoy before it all ends." "That's the thing," Maki said. "It doesn't have to end like that." Mai's brow furrowed. "And what exactly is your miracle plan?" Maki took a breath. "Mahito." That name pulled Mai's attention back immediately. "He can sever the bond between us," Maki continued. "He says it'll make us stronger. Both of us. My heavenly restriction would reach its full potential, and your curse technique could be freed. No holding back. No zen in deciding what you're worth." Mai's expression shifted in small, reluctant increments. First the disbelief, then the slow, creeping consideration. "That's not possible." "It is," Maki said firmly. "He's confident. But it's risky. Untested. He's calling it an experimental procedure for a reason." Mai leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if the answer might be written there. "And if it fails?" Maki didn't flinch. "Then we go down on our own terms. Not theirs." Her determination burned brightly, she hoped to break from her shackles, and she was willing to pay any price for it. The room felt heavier then. The kind of heaviness that came from too many truths laid bare. "You know," Mai said slowly, "I always thought you were the stubborn one because you wanted to prove them wrong. But maybe it's because you just can't stand losing." Maki smiled faintly. "You're not wrong." For a while, they sat in silence, two halves of the same coin finally facing the same direction. "I hate to admit it," Mai said at last, "but you're right. My future here is garbage. Best case scenario, I get shipped off to some old man so the clan can stroke its own ego." Her voice caught on the words, though she forced it steady again. "If this works, maybe I get to write my own future instead." Maki's eyes softened just slightly. "So we agree?" Mai exhaled, a long, slow surrender. "We agree." They didn't hug. They didn't need to. They had never been on good terms to begin with, not since they chose different routes in life. But now? Hugging felt wrong. After all, they were about to attempt to sever the deepest connection between them, the bond in their souls. For their own good, to create a better future. The decision hung between them like a silent pact. Later that day, the rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and sharp with the smell of wet earth. Mahito was exactly where Yuki thought she might find him, stretched lazily along one of the low stone steps that framed the training grounds, eyes half closed like a cat in a patch of sun. It looked almost as if he wasn't all there. She took her time approaching, letting her footsteps carry just enough weight to announce herself without rushing. "Twice in 1 week," Mahito said without opening his eyes. "Am I supposed to start thinking you like me?" Yuki's smile was slow, measured. "Would that be a problem?" "Depends," Mahito replied, finally cracking one eye open to look at her. "On whether you actually do, or if you're just here for my cursed technique." She laughed lightly, though inside she was already weighing her next move. In their previous meetings, she'd seen something in him, some kernel of honesty and kindness buried under all the smugness. He didn't hide what he wanted, and he didn't waste time pretending to believe in lofty ideals. And his ability might be the answer she had been searching for all her life. A way to break the boundaries of cursed energy, to reshape what was possible. But telling him that outright would be a mistake. He didn't strike her as someone who responded well to being told what he should do. No, Mahito needed to think it was his choice. She lowered herself to sit beside him, crossing one leg over the other. "Maybe I just like your company. You're not like the rest of them." Mahito tilted his head. "Flattery? From you?" "Observation," Yuki corrected, leaning slightly closer. "Besides, you're a rare kind of honest. Most people dance around what they want. You just say it." Mahito's grin widened. "And what do you want?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "To see what you can really do, up close." For a moment, the air between them felt charged, but not with cursed energy. Mahito studied her the way he studied everything, as though he were taking apart each word to see what lay underneath. "I could show you," he said eventually, "but it may be more than you can take." "Ho ho. Well, we'll see about that later. For now, how has your life here been?" Yuki replied, her tone playful but her intent sharp as glass. She had no plans to rush this. A steady approach would keep him curious and keep him open. They talked for a while, their conversation meandering between harmless jabs and subtle probing. Mahito didn't mind the attention, in fact, he found it unexpectedly refreshing. Yuki wasn't afraid of him, and she didn't seem to care about whatever stories the others told. By the time the sky began to darken, the tension had shifted. It was no longer a verbal game. Their banter carried a different edge, one that neither of them bothered to dull. Yuki leaned in, her voice a little lower. "You know, for someone who's supposedly dangerous, you're awfully easy to be around." Mahito's smirk returned, sharper now. "You'd be surprised how many people find me interesting." "Interesting, hmm?" She let the word hang there, testing it. "I can see that." Neither of them needed to say the rest. The pull was there, mutual and unspoken. Later, in the quiet of a dimly lit room, the conversation stopped altogether. Whatever caution Yuki had planned to maintain blurred at the edges, and whatever restraint Mahito had been holding on to dissolved in the warmth of proximity. "We get along fine enough. If she wants to give so easily, then who am I to complain?" He had not been with anyone in months, and though he rarely admitted to feeling anything as human as pent-up, he had no reason to refuse, did he? It certainly helped that he could feel it. The desire within Yuki. She had something else besides desire buried within her thoughts, but then again, why would someone interact with him without trying to gain anything? It was only natural. In neither of his lives had he experienced unconditional love. He didn't think it even existed. For Yuki, it was not just about the act itself but the space it created. A closeness she thought she could use. Trust was a currency, and tonight she was about to make a down payment. The real question was, Could she keep control of the game she had just chosen to play? The room was quiet enough that Yuki could hear the faint rustle of the curtains as they shifted in the night breeze. The lamplight had gone dim, casting everything in amber shadow. Somewhere between their banter and the stillness that followed, the balance of the room had shifted. Mahito leaned closer without warning, the familiar smirk gone, replaced by something slower, more deliberate. His hand found the curve of her jaw, tilting her face up toward his. His touch was warm, warmer than she'd expected, and unhurried, as though he were savoring the fact that she didn't pull away. Then his lips brushed hers. They felt hot, as if they were melting against hers. It wasn't the careless peck she'd half expected from an inexperienced curse, nor the rough claiming of someone trying to prove a point. It was purposeful, coaxing, like he was reading her reactions as easily as he read a soul. I should not be thinking about this. But she was. The thought tangled with the undeniable fact that he was good at this. Too good. A soft moan lodged itself in her throat as she felt his wet tongue gently tug at hers. Everything about him felt strangely warm, despite the repulsive energy that birthed him. She was left rolling in her thoughts for minutes on end as the special grade curse continued enjoying her lips tenderly. When his mouth eventually left hers, a trail of saliva followed it, making her slightly embarrassed as he smiled at her in a warm and extremely affectionate way. "What's wrong? Has a curse got your tongue?" There it was. The smugness that he always liked to flaunt. But instead of amusing, she couldn't help but find it hot in that moment. She was about to say something, but she was stopped as Mahito pulled her in once more. His lips shifted, forming a trail along the line of her jaw. She almost laughed at the absurdity. A curse. I'm letting a curse kiss me like this. The laugh never came. Her breath caught instead, betraying her far more than any words could. Every kiss blurred the lines. The further his lips went, the harder it became to remember why she'd kept that line between them in the first place. His kisses moved lower, deliberate as footsteps, each one stealing more of her focus as her gaze grew cloudy. Before she realized, her shirt had disappeared, and her bra had fallen to the wayside. The curse in front of her displayed a rather deft hand as he undid the clasps with just one hand. Meanwhile, his other hand traced her supple legs and hips, purposefully avoiding the sweet wet spot that had already formed through her pants. Her clothes. She hadn't even taken off her clothes, and she was already this wet. This is ridiculous. Why is he like this? She couldn't even put into words the pleasure she felt when his lips eventually took a bite out of her perked-up nipples. At that point, she could no longer stop her moans from escaping, further emboldening the smug Mahito to continue. His kisses traced lower and lower. He kissed her toned abdomen, tracing her belly button with a smile on his face, while she softly murmured. Eventually, he reached the place that was most begging for attention. Her honey pot was already overflowing, causing her jeans to stick slightly as Mahito damn near ripped them off her. Then she felt something she had never experienced in her entire life. The morning light was soft but merciless, prying at her closed eyes until she gave in and rolled onto her back. The room smelled prominently of her excitement. Any other scent in the room was completely drowned out. Her hair was a mess. Her entire body trembled as she struggled to even lift a finger. She, a special grade sorcerer, was rendered helpless. She could still feel Mahito's shape in her. She felt full even now. And judging from the white, sticky stuff around her inner thighs, she likely was full. Despite the roughness with which he treated her, he left no actual injuries or tears on her. He was careful with her. But, despite showing that much affection at first and taking care of her in such a way, Mahito was nowhere in sight in the morning. Instead, his presence was only felt through a note by the bedside, near some breakfast and water. The note was just some platitude about her losing too much water and not forgetting to hydrate properly. Yet another snide jab from the man who had rendered her to such a state. She stretched experimentally, then winced. Great, she muttered to herself, it feels like I've been training for 3 days straight. It wasn't the kind of ache she'd ever expected to use the reversed curse technique on, but here she was, nudging her body back into ease with a trickle of positive energy. She didn't regret it. Not exactly. But there was a strange weight in her chest that she couldn't name. Last night had made it harder to keep her mental categories neat. Mahito, the curse, the unpredictable variable, the dangerous wild card, didn't quite fit in the same box anymore. Not after seeing him like that. Not after feeling him like that. She sat up, dragging a hand through her hair. Careful, Yuki, she murmured under her breath. You start forgetting what he is, and you're going to end up making mistakes you can't take back. But she already knew part of her didn't care. Part of her knew it. She had already made one such mistake. The morning sunlight spilled into the courtyard in gentle slants, painting the stone paths with soft gold. A light breeze rustled the leaves overhead, carrying the faint scent of dew and distant cedar. Mahito lounged against the low wall, arms crossed, his posture effortless, as though the world itself existed to flow around him. The usual stillness of the early hours suited him perfectly. Yuji and Kujisaki appeared first, their expressions half awake, half annoyed. Seriously, what was up last night? I thought the walls were going to shake themselves down. Yuji muttered, rubbing at his eyes. I thought something had broken outside last night. Kujisaki scowled, stepping forward with her usual sharpness. Seriously. Whatever was going on in this building, I don't want to hear it again. My ears are still ringing. Mahito lifted a brow and gave a lazy shrug, as if their complaints barely registered. You weren't the ones making the noise, were you? He asked, voice smooth and unconcerned. Yuji opened his mouth to protest, but Kujisaki elbowed him sharply. Shut it. It's not worth the argument. The curse's gaze drifted over them, calm and amused. He could see the annoyance in their eyes, the frustration of not knowing exactly what had disturbed them. The corners of his mouth lifted in a subtle, self-satisfied smirk. Some things were better left unexplained. The two were still young at the end of the day, and Mahito didn't feel like being the one to have the talk with them. But Megumi had no such reservations. Next time you do anything intimate, please do so outside the dormitories. I will file a complaint with the principal otherwise. His deadpan and tired tone sounded even more frustrated than usual, causing the special grade curse to roll his eyes. Huh? You mean to tell me those screams were? Kujisaki seemed to immediately become amused, while Yuji remained confused. Yes, and at the same time. I do agree to keep it down from now on. It had just been a while. Went a bit overboard. Mahito laughed a bit, his feet swaying slightly as he lay down without a care in the world. Megumi narrowed his eyes, unsure how to even respond to that. Kujisaki just turned slightly red, and Yuji tilted his head to the side in a confused, innocent manner. Whatever. Let's go get breakfast. We have training afterwards. Megumi continued onwards, Yuji and Kujisaki following behind. The latter was handling her new disability nicely enough. She moved swiftly in her wheelchair and was even still willing to be active in certain missions. She wanted to continue training her cursed technique, even as she was. Her resolve was commendable, but once again, none of Mahito's business. A few moments passed before a new presence drew his attention. Yuki emerged at the far end of the courtyard, her appearance immaculate as always. Her hair was perfectly in place, her posture measured, and yet there was a tension in her shoulders that betrayed the effort behind the composure. You seem cold this morning, she said quietly, her voice almost swallowed by the soft hum of the courtyard. Mahito tilted his head slightly, studying her expression with a slow, calculating interest. Cold, he repeated. What do you mean? My heart still beating, I am very much warm. Yuki blinked, a flicker of hesitation crossing her features. I mean, after last night, I thought you might snuggle up with me in the morning or something. She trailed off, the last part remaining unsaid as she was caught between curiosity and uncertainty. But it was the truth. She had wanted nothing more than to hug him in the morning after such a passionate night. Yet, the coldness of that room was accentuated when she woke up alone. The note, although in the same smug and joking tone, hadn't relayed any affection to Yuki. It was just friendly at best. But Mahito cared for none of that. Unfortunately for her, he was not as blind as she thought. Tell me, Yuki, Mahito said, his tone even, almost teasing in its clarity. What were you hoping to achieve? Her confusion was immediate and sharp. The words sank in with the weight of something far heavier than any casual morning remark. Inside, her heart began to twist uncomfortably, a strange type of pain that she had never felt before. I don't understand, she whispered. The words sounded weaker than she intended, her voice betraying the sudden turbulence of her thoughts. I already know, Mahito continued, his eyes steady on hers. I felt it. The feelings and desires buried within your soul, the ones you attempted to hide. Yuki felt as if a bucket of cold water had just dropped over her head. The worst part? She couldn't even refute it. Yet, she felt ashamed. And even worse, she felt even more hurt. You were not pursuing me out of lust or pure desire, Yuki. You were attempting to achieve something else entirely. So, what do you need from me? Her chest tightened. Her pulse quickened, each beat seeming to echo in her ears. She tried to muster a response, something firm and composed, like she usually could. But the words lodged themselves somewhere between fear and embarrassment. I will reach out later, she finally said, voice shakier than intended, forcing a small, uncertain smile. I have something to take care of. She turned to leave, each step measured yet hurried. The tears threatening to spill were fought back with tight control, but her throat burned, and her chest felt heavy. This was unlike her. The hurt was alien, a sensation that left her simultaneously frustrated and raw. Mahito watched her go, unmoved, his expression unreadable. He had known from the start that she saw him only as a means to an end. He could even guess what end she was aiming for, already knowing her dreams and life's goals. He, however, hadn't anticipated her vulnerability. He failed to account for her heart burning as it did. To him, feelings, if they existed, had no place in a transaction. The courtyard returned to its quiet rhythm. The sunlight shifted over the stone paths, warming the air and catching in the dew-laden grass. Mahito allowed himself a small stretch, the corners of his mouth tugging into a faint smirk. A few minutes passed before Maki and Mai appeared, approaching with purposeful strides. Their eyes were clear, determination evident in every movement. We are ready to start the procedure, Maki announced, her voice firm and unwavering. Mahito inclined his head, the faintest acknowledgement passing over his features. Very well, he said simply, his voice as calm and composed as the morning itself. Let us begin. The infirmary smelled faintly of antiseptic and clean linen. 2 beds sat side by side in the middle of the room, each with fresh sheets neatly tucked in. Maki occupied the right bed, arms folded across her chest, posture upright and unyielding. Her gaze was fixed on Mahito, following his movements like a predator tracking prey. On the left bed, Mai sat with her legs crossed, hands resting neatly on her knees. She didn't look at him directly, instead glancing past him with a cool, detached air, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Mahito stood between them, his usual relaxed posture in place. Shoko Yeri leaned casually against a counter near the far wall, gloves already on, her expression as unreadable as ever. You two are more connected than most realize, Mahito began, his voice carrying an easy, conversational tone. not just through blood. As twins, there's a depth to that bond that goes beyond. It's in your souls. Maki's mouth twitched into a faint frown. We know. You've said that before. Get to the point. As much as she respected him after their spar and offer, she was already anxious enough about the entire procedure. Mahito smiled faintly, not taking her too seriously as he stepped closer. You think you know. But I can see what most can't. He placed one hand lightly on Maki's shoulder and the other on Mai's. Your souls are bound by an invisible thread. It's alive. It shapes you in ways you've never noticed. Shoko straightened slightly, her gaze narrowing as she sensed the subtle shift in the air. Mahito's focus deepened. The invisible thread came into view for him, a shimmering, pulsating cord of energy that ran between the twins, glowing with a strange, almost magnetic pull. It wasn't just a connection, it was a shared anchor that pulled on both of them in different ways. Within the tether, he saw their desires, raw and unfiltered. Freedom. One burned hot with the urge to fight for it relentlessly. The other reached for it but recoiled in fear, holding back. Together, those conflicting instincts had knotted the bond tight. Mahito began to unravel it, strand by strand. His grip on their shoulders was gentle, but the air around them thickened, the faint hum of purplish energy in the room growing louder. Then it happened. The moment the final strand loosened, the bond didn't simply fade, it detonated. Mai's cursed energy burst outward like a shockwave, slamming into the walls and rattling the medical equipment. The sterile air was suddenly heavy with raw, unrestrained power. Her reserves expanded at a dizzying rate, surging until they rivaled those of a special-grade sorcerer. Her breath hitched sharply, eyes widening as if something inside her had been unlocked. The construction technique she'd always carried now had an ocean of energy behind it, a potential she had never imagined possible. At the same moment, Maki's body convulsed. Her cursed energy evaporated in an instant, stripped away until nothing remained. The absence was almost audible, a sudden, profound silence in the weak current of power that had always hummed beneath her skin. Her muscles tensed, then began to expand and contract in rapid succession, the transformation forcing its way through her frame. The process was brutal, her breath came in ragged bursts, teeth gritted against the pain. Veins stood out along her arms as her strength doubled, tripled, then pushed further still. Every fiber of her body hardened, refined beyond the limits of any ordinary sorcerer. She could feel it. The raw, explosive power in her limbs. Mahito watched with rapt fascination, his eyes flitting between them as if memorizing every detail. The air crackled around Mai's bed, her energy almost singing against his senses, while Maki's transformation radiated a different kind of intensity, pure, unrestrained physical dominance. Shoko took a step forward, her brow furrowing. This level of change, their bodies aren't ready for it. As if on cue, Mai let out a shuddering breath, her body sagging as the flood of power overwhelmed her. Maki's legs buckled beneath the strain of her reshaped muscles, her eyes fluttering closed. Both collapsed onto their respective beds, unconscious. Mahito slowly removed his hands, stepping back to take in the scene. Fascinating, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. Shoko was already moving, checking pulses, examining breathing patterns. They'll live, she said curtly. But their bodies and minds will need time to adapt. This much change at once. It's a lot, even for them. Mahito only smiled, his gaze lingering on each twin in turn. He had just confirmed something far more valuable than the physical results, the knowledge that a person's deepest desires could be found, manipulated, and in some cases, weaponized. He would keep that revelation to himself for now. No sense in spoiling the surprise for later. The room gradually settled. The hum of Mai's energy softened, though it still pressed faintly against the edges of perception. Maki's body, now free of cursed energy entirely, looked deceptively still, but Mahito knew the raw strength lying beneath that calm exterior. He stepped toward the door without hurry. "I'll leave them in your care, Doctor. When they wake, tell them they're free now. What they do with that freedom is up to them." Shoko didn't look up from her work. "And how exactly does this benefit you?" Her voice was as unfeeling as Mahito had remembered it. But her question felt a bit too odd. Had he left some excitement slip on his face as he studied that bond between the twins? It couldn't be helped. It was not like he would get that opportunity often. Turns out, for a technique like his, studying the natural bond between two souls was all he needed to gain a rather important enlightenment. It was to the point where he felt he had unlocked a new avenue for his technique to improve upon. Mahito's smirk deepened as he reached the doorway. "I am merely happy to help." His voice sounded so genuine in that moment that no one could tell that he was, in fact, lying. The courtyard had emptied hours ago, the echoes of training and idle chatter replaced by the quiet rhythm of the wind through the trees. Mahito preferred these hours. They belonged to him. Not his shell, not his conversations, not the distractions of other people's voices. Just him, his thoughts, and the endless hum of possibilities. Far from the school's walls, in an abandoned complex where even stray dogs avoided the shadows, his other self worked. Mahito's eyes half-lidded as he leaned against the balcony rail, feeling the faint pulse of the soul link between them. Splitting his soul had been a curiosity once, a theory tested in brief moments. Now it was refined. Controlled. The clone moved with his precision, thought with his intention, and, thanks to the new understanding gleaned during the Maki and my procedure, carried his technique exactly as his original body did. Rather, it was more accurate to say he could transfer his full consciousness through that soul link. His consciousness carried his curse technique. The soul link shimmered like a taut thread between them, carrying more than mere instructions. It transferred skill, sensation, and the intricate patterns of idle transfiguration without the usual need for proximity. And through that link, the work continued uninterrupted. The cavern beneath the complex was lit only by the glow of scattered lanterns, their light falling across dozens of figures in various states of completion. Some stood tall and still, heads tilted slightly as if listening. Others sat cross-legged on the floor, their faces blank, waiting for the next layer of thought to be stitched into them. The first breed was familiar, the fly soldiers. Chitin-armored, multi-eyed, and winged, each one crafted from low-level curses remnants and further accumulated surrounding cursed energy, their purpose singular: swarm, overwhelm, and consume. But the second breed was different. They were shaped like people. Paler, perhaps. Limbs a fraction too long, movements almost too precise, but unmistakably human in outline. Where the fly soldiers were built for numbers, these were designed for something more refined. The clone stood before one of them, a tall male figure with short black hair and an unreadable expression. The skin along his arms was etched faintly with the patterns of his reshaped soul, as if invisible chains had been melted into place. Mahito had named them Soulforged. The name pleased him, a reminder that these creatures were not simply twisted humans, but something entirely new. Creating them was costly. Resources had to be chosen carefully. Criminals made excellent starting material. Their souls were already frayed, darkened by deeds they did not regret. Mercenaries worked too, ambition and violence left them open to reshaping. And those teetering on the edge of suicide often carried such deep fractures in their souls that the rebuilding process was almost effortless. Mahito had no trouble acquiring them. Nor did it feel morally wrong to him. They were mostly criminals, and those on the verge of committing suicide were put to better use in his hands. The beauty of splitting his soul was that the clone could operate while the original carried on as if nothing were amiss. A missing person here or there drew no notice in the right parts of the world. The process began the same way every time, the soul stripped bare, its flaws and fractures exposed, then rebuilt under Mahito's hands. But the refinement came in the next step. In the Soulforged, Mahito embedded something new, pieces of consciousness stripped from their former human lives. Not enough to be dangerous, not enough to allow them independence from him, but enough for them to think. To reason. To learn. Each piece was a shard of intent, a splinter of will shaped to slot seamlessly into their new form. With it came memory patterns, problem-solving ability, even a sense of individuality, but all threaded through with one immutable truth: they existed to serve him. He had learned from the twins that desires were the glue binding souls together. Without a shared desire, bonds frayed and broke. With the right one, they became stronger than steel. So he wove it into every Soulforged, a single, unshakable desire that sat deeper than thought or instinct: loyalty to Mahito. Not loyalty to his face or his name, but to the idea of him. To the core of his being. They would look at him, any him, clone or original, and know without hesitation that their purpose was to follow. In the cavern, the clone moved to the next figure. This one was female, her hair cropped short, her gaze already following his movements. She had reached the stage where the consciousness shard was settling into place. Her lips parted. Orders? The voice was quiet, almost toneless, but the word was clear. Not yet, the clone replied. You will know them when the time comes. Her head dipped slightly, and she returned to stillness. Mahito allowed himself a flicker of satisfaction. It wasn't just creation anymore. It was cultivation. Every Soulforged was capable of thought, but their thoughts revolved around him. Their choices would always lead back to him, because their desires had been rewritten to make it so. Above ground, the original Mahito pushed away from the railing. Through the link, he could feel the clone's progress. The connection between them was steady, the stream of impressions and updates flowing like a second heartbeat. He didn't need to see the Soulforged to know that their ranks were growing. He could feel them, dozens of minds aligned toward him, pulsing with the same singular loyalty. In time, they would surpass the fly soldiers. The swarm would remain useful for brute force, but the Soulforged could infiltrate, adapt, and blend. They could wear human faces convincingly enough to walk among crowds without drawing suspicion. And unlike ordinary followers, they would never betray him. They couldn't. The structure of their souls made it impossible. He was not troubled by the implications. Whether one called it creation, manipulation, or playing God was irrelevant. What mattered was that it worked. That it would continue to work. In the cavern, the clone moved to a workbench scattered with fragments of soul glass, crystallized remains of particularly strong wills. They would be useful for the next batch, lending the Soulforged sharper reflexes or faster thinking. Mahito's fingers trailed over them, already planning. The knowledge gained from the twins' bond still burned bright in his mind. He had seen how desires could intertwine, how they could merge into something greater than the sum of their parts. That same principle could bind not just two souls, but many. A single desire, shared perfectly, could unify an entire nation, let alone an army. And his army was almost ready.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.